'Twas brillig and the slithy toves did gyre and gimble in the wabe. All mimsy were the borough groves and the mome raths out gabe. Beware the jabberwock, my son, the jaws that bite, the claws that catch. Beware the jub bird, and shun the frumious bandersnatch.
What's up, everybody? This is the Constant Crusade podcast. My name is EJ Olson. I am joined today, for the first time ever, Nicholas Durheim. How you doing, man?
Oh, the one and only. I'm doing quite wonderful, as you heard by my joyful and exotic rendition of the Jabberwocky earlier, which you're probably going to use as the intro.
You know,
because you are a douche.
You know it's going in.
I mean, if you want me to, I'll do a clean one, because I was trying to get my lips to be moving with a higher energy and purpose, so I could enunciate clearly.
You can enunciate your words, unlike me. I need to focus on again enunciating, but also trying to squash this lisp that I have, and it's very difficult. And now I sound like I'm talking to a second grader who is not listening to me.
To me.
It's not comfortable. So I'm just going to talk like myself. If it bothers you guys, come say something to me on fucking Twitter at @ejiggle. I'll block your ass. You can find Nick on Twitter. You can complain to him. He'll relay the message. He's on Twitter at @PrushTillDeath. He will not block you. The Constant Crusade, we're also on Twitter collectively. Us as a duo, a twosome.
Mostly you.
Well, log into that bitch. Okay. Anyway, find us on console_crusade. I was going to ask you about this because I wanted to tweet some things about games from it, but I kept stopping myself because I don't want to, I don't want to misrepresent the brand, aka put words in your mouth.
I've given you some shit about that in the past, but honestly, I don't really care.
Should we tweet and then just sign our tags so that people know who's saying what?
Yeah, sure.
Because I got thoughts.
280 characters now. I mean,
It going down. Anyway, you can also email us. Gotta get all this out of the way, right? You can email us. What's the email? It's feedback@consolecrusade.com.
Yeah, or email at consolecrusade.com.
Preferably just the feedback one.
Doesn't matter. It all goes to the same place. A little bit behind the curtain. I made them both because I wanted to ask you which one you preferred.
Oh, I like feedback because that's more purposeful than just email. You know? Feedback, there's a reason that you're writing and sending to this particular address. I love it.
Email.
Okay. Oh, anyway.
It's a call to action. I get you. I pick up what you're putting down.
Questions, comments, concerns, hit us up. Email us. Tweet at us. We're going to be doing listener mail, which I think I said last pod.
We're going to be saying the same things multiple times probably because we're recording two different things. Because we had a cool little interview with a friend.
Yeah, so on this episode, sometime in the very near future, you will be listening to an interview, well, more of a conversation, a chat with my buddy Milo Kent-Pettit, who's been on the podcast before, but unfortunately you were not a part of that. But this time, we did some janky Skype magic. We got you on. We had a conversation. It's going to sound it's going to sound marginally worse than this current conversation, just due to the nature of the setup. But I think it was a really good conversation. You were hyped, which gets me hyped. I had a good time just sort of dropping eaves, sitting back and observing the two of you having a conversation. So good stuff. But we'll get there. In the meantime, we got a couple of bits we want to talk about. Nothing big. I mean, I know Gamescom's going on right now, but I feel like nothing has really happened. It's sort of
Gamescom, I feel like, is a lot more of a consumer-facing show, so there's not really a lot of announcements. It's more like, hey, here's a dev diary. There's our first playable demo, because like games like Sekiro are playable at Gamescom, but that was already announced at E3.
Yeah, so I feel like every time I check my news feed, my video game news feed, it's
a lot of little tidbits, which I think will be PAX next week also.
Yeah, probably nothing meaningful, nothing that'll move the needle. I'm sure the Nintendo Direct, which by the time you guys have heard this podcast, has already passed, but I'm sure that will have more meaningful information than anything coming out of Gamescom or PAX potentially. So just wanted to mention kind of what transpires today, just because it's obviously pertains to the things we like and the things we're currently talking about.
Well, we're recording on Sunday. This usually we'll be posting on Wednesday, But so just to...
Right. A little frame of reference as far as where we are in time. So earlier today, Sunday, was it the 26th? There was a shooting at... Was it an EA event for the new Madden game?
Yeah, it was a Madden tournament held in Jacksonville, Florida.
So obviously that's fucking awful. I think that a few people lost their lives. And of course, it's, as often is the case, it's always at an event, you know, a concert or a video game fucking convention or a school. You know, it's these seemingly supposed to be safe places, right? And that just fucking sucks, man.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to kind of bring it up just to have condolences for the family and friends involved.
It's fucking video games, man. And of course, this being relevant to us because it's, again, this is, you know, our hobby, but like I said, whether it's a concert or a school or what, it's like, of all the fucking places, really? And I feel like every time there's a shooting like this, you kind of slump your shoulders and say, really? Of all places. We don't know any more details than that. I don't think we necessarily, you know, we don't want to go down that rabbit hole and start speculating or anything, but I do want to pose the question, but what does this kind of mean going forward for not just events like this? Like you said, PAX is coming up. You know, every time there's an incident like this, sort of it becomes the hot topic for the week and talking about security and gun control and, you know, what have you. So,
well, I know for, I don't know about PAX, but I know E3, since they opened to the public last year was the first year, maybe 2 years ago, but they've been increasing the number of ticket sales that they're making available to the public. And this year they had a mandatory bag check for all the entrances. So I think it's just a learning curve, sort of figuring out how to deal with having, you know, thousands of people in one building.
Right.
And I don't know how many people were at the Jacksonville event, but I've seen a lot of communities kind of ask themselves, okay, how do we respond to this? How do we make our attendees more safe and make them feel better about attending, you know? Because you bring together any large number of people and that automatically poses a security risk, unfortunately.
And that should be the concern, right? Is how do we make people safer at events like this? Unfortunately, hopping on Twitter, people are already starting our favorite debate, you know, violence in video games and how has that impacted this tragedy or whatever. And I'm all against politicizing tragedy like this to fuel any sort of narrative, but
I've also seen, you know, positive like call to actions like, hey, if you live in the Florida area, try to make sure that you can go give blood because that can be really helpful. You know, doing like GoFundMe donation things for medical costs. Like people come together from these kind of things too. So it's nice to focus on the good aspects when you can.
Yeah. So on that note, we're going to actually dive into the topics today. I know that's always a fun thing to lead off with, but
yeah, the other useless bullshit that we're more interested in because we know more about them and we can smile and laugh and have a jolly good time.
And at the end of the day, kind of the whole point in any of this, whether it's us podcasting or us actually playing the games, it's, you know, it's entertainment. It's there for us to, this is our vessel for temporarily leaving the stresses of life, right? So
yeah, or even like opening your mind up a little bit, giving yourself a new perspective on thoughts and ideas and feelings.
Right.
Art is important. And video games, whether you like it or not, are kind of art.
Oh,
well, I won't say fully art, but you know. Fuck. Michelangelo never made a video game, you know what I'm saying?
Well, that's been the Constant Crusade podcast, folks.
Oh man, yeah, that bit never gets old, EJ.
I think I cut it out of like every podcast, so we'll see if it makes it this time or not.
Oh God.
But you know, I did just see on Twitter, and I wish I could pull up the tweet, but it's gonna be super loud.
Use your phone; it's silent.
Oh shit! I've got the technology. Someone was getting into. I think you retweeted it, didn't you? Yeah, you definitely did. It was the guy talking about how everyone who plays video games, you know, they are losers, and
I love those takes. They're so funny. They give me life.
They give me life. So let me just read this, and also give you context as far as who is, you know, spouting this fucking nonsense via the interweb.
Well, I found it from an account that's called like No Fun Allowed,
right?
And they just screenshot things that are like people saying you can't have fun,
basically,
in essence.
So this guy on Twitter said, if you play video games, any kind, for any amount of time, you are a loser to some extent. You are substituting real-world conquests and glory for artificial conquering of the virtual world. That matters nothing. And in quotes, he says, tell this to professional esports players, haha. And he's like, no, they're losers too, just to a lesser extent.
And also, quick little, just to give you a little bit of a picture of who this is, also, his avatar is just a picture of a car.
Right. Like a very nice, expensive car. Right. So, this guy, I'm sure he's a self-made man. Based on the responses, it seems like quite the opposite. This is a trust fund kid who's crying on the internet. But so, yeah, of course, it's a lot easier to go out in the world and do whatever you want and reap the rewards of real conquests and glory if you've got all the money.
That's such a funny stone to throw.
I know, right? So anyway, somebody had some big long tweet, but the last bit of it was, so kindly fuck off, stop generalizing an art form with many different layers of complexity and go back to mommy and daddy and their money. And this guy just responds with, video games aren't art. They are drugs. Art is graceful, beautiful. It frees the soul and the mind. Video games numb the mind and weaken the soul.
Can that be our new byline?
God's Crusade podcast. Numb the mind and weaken the soul.
Yes, that's perfect. I think that perfectly just encompasses us.
Yeah, honestly, that's scarily accurate. I'm gonna go cry now. So anyway, that's fun. That's always a fun little deal. That kind of stuff pops up, and people on the internet, they whine and cry and they get defensive about the thing that they like, and I get it. People identify with the things they love, right? So video games is not just a thing they do. Video games is who they are oftentimes.
It's a dangerous game to play.
Right. And listen, video games are not part of my identity. There are a lot of things that I love to do that are not a part of my identity. I think the relationships oftentimes that these hobbies can foster, obviously are very important to me. But again, it's video games as the catalyst, not necessarily like the reason for, my fucking existence. So,
and you see extremists in all sorts of hobbies and politics and what have you. Like, think of a thing and think of someone who's way too into that thing,
right?
And they're probably insufferable. So I think all things in moderation.
Maybe I just kind of take the shit well because I'm, as a big basketball fan, I'm used to taking shit from a lot of my friends who don't give two fucks about sports, Oh, you just got a big old brain because he watches basketball. It's just...
That's what sports do, man.
Part of the territory of liking a thing is somebody who doesn't like it will inevitably give you shit for it, whether maliciously or otherwise. So anyway, that kind of stuff makes me laugh, And
Twitter is, just to derail even further, but Twitter is a platform built on that, where people say ridiculous shit and then everyone gets mad at them, and then one person uses a slur against them, then they quote tweet it and be like, oh, see, this is what you get for having an opinion. And then it just turns into this whole, it's just a spiral of negativity and ignorance. And that's why I like to just sort of watch it sometimes and then just tweet my own dumb thoughts into the void.
It can be very entertaining. It's been interesting to see the evolution of Twitter. Just let's totally derail this podcast before we even fucking get on the tracks here. But why is the train not on the tracks to begin with? When is a train ever not on the tracks?
When it's being made, I don't know. Or when it's flying through the air because it hit a penny that a hobo put on there to try and make a cool flat penny.
We used to do that in high school, put quarters on the Max tracks. Never derailed the Max.
Yeah, I was going to say, did it ever flatten the quarter?
I actually don't recall ever successfly doing it because it would hit and then you would never find the quarter. The quarter lodged. So come to think of it, that was really dangerous. That could have just domed one of us. Can you imagine?
Or anybody.
Or yeah, a totally unsuspecting passerby. But anyway, watching Twitter evolve, I was on Twitter in 2008. I think you were on that year or shortly after.
Yeah, it was 2009. It was after I graduated, but I wasn't even really on Twitter. I would tweet I would text the Twitter number, and then my texts would be tweeted.
Right.
So I would just get so many text messages from people replying me, and they would just go directly to my phone because I didn't have a smartphone. I didn't have a smartphone until 2011.
Same.
So I was just dumb. I was a dumb phone man. Think
about it. 2008, this is right after the iPhone launch. Nobody had smartphones in 2008. There was one person in high school whose rich parents would bought them, the iPhone 3G or whatever, and everybody wanted to touch it. Nobody had smartphones. Smartphones weren't ubiquitous until 11 or 12.
The iPod Touch wasn't even out then.
Yeah, it was out that early. I had an iPod Touch in 2009.
I thought it was a couple years until after. Well, anyway, this has been the Twitter Crusade podcast.
Yeah. So, I don't know. Twitter used to be, it still is a news platform, and it still is, big for entertainment and stuff, but just...
Yeah, I still got a lot of my news from just based purely on who I follow, and they're kind of... That's what they do, is they tweet out the relevant news to my interests. So yeah, that's where I find a lot of my news. But I think just any platform that you get that many people and you make it that easy to communicate to each other, it's gonna cause a lot of tension.
I don't know who said it, but somewhere online, I came across a thing that said Facebook was ruined when your parents got Facebook, right? And I think about it, I'm like, that is super accurate. As soon as the boomers got a hold of it, everything went to shit. And Twitter's the exact same fucking way.
Twitter, I think, just has a lot of people, and it's really easy to weaponize your followers to attack other followers.
Shouts to Bob Mackey.
Doesn't matter who you're talking about. That's just
No, I know.
what people do. It's just an easy way for everyone to find their own circle jerk and listen to what they want to hear and attack those that don't.
We're going to move on to something actually video games related here. We have a couple of little things to talk about, again, because it's been a slow news week as far as actual video game content. But a couple things that I want to touch on. Something we briefly mentioned. Actually, I think when we recorded last, this news had just dropped maybe right afterward. The Spyro Reignited trilogy, which was slated for release in 2 weeks, I believe.
Yeah, I think it was the following week after Spider-Man, so about 2 weeks. Yeah.
So, oh God, I can't believe Spider-Man's next week.
Did we even talk about, it was like Spyro, they couldn't fit the first game was on the disc, but the second two weren't.
Yeah, we mentioned that. And you had speculated, again, was that because they got the first game running, but they're having tons of issues with the last two games, and so...
Potentially, or even not necessarily tons of issues, but they submitted the first game for certification, and that got passed, so that was what would be printed on the disc.
Right.
But I think that based on either the feedback of everyone being like, hey, I don't want to download 40 gigs of 2 games, I want it just all on the disc, and maybe potentially them saying, hey, September is a really busy month, November is looking a lot better for this kind of game, that Activision was like, you know what, let's just push it back. I mean, it's Spyro, it's kind of low stakes as it is.
Which is a huge bummer. And as much as I wish it were coming out sooner rather than later, like, you're right, it's small potatoes. And by pushing it back, and here's where we kind of differ. I'm a fan of getting the game out there, and then it's like, hey, you've got time to fix it once it's gone gold, and you're a fan of, say, hey, push it back and release a game that's finished. Obviously, that's what they're doing here. It seems like they push it back, they're going to finish the game. Like, that's good. At least I'd rather that than have a game release and then, do the Final Fantasy 15 thing. Obviously, this is a game on a much, much smaller and a much different scope. But
or even just the YouTube videos and the Twitter posts and the Reddit comments of being like, hey, this game's broken, or the frame rate's really bad. Why are the second 2 games so choppy when the first worked so well?
Right.
I'd rather just have for me personally, as an experiencing the game, I'd rather experience it and enjoy it the entire way through with everybody else enjoying it all the way through, as opposed to I like it, but everyone else is talking shit about it, and now I just feel bad about liking it.
Right.
Or whatever reason, I can wait.
Spider-Man comes out again a week before it was originally slated for release. So as much as I really want to play this game, because Spyro 1 and 2 were some of my favorite childhood games, my first PlayStation game was Spyro, I really want to experience this again, remade, remastered, whatever. You know what? I can wait. I'll have Spider-Man. I'm going to be going a little crazy on that.
Yeah, you can not play an Insomniac game you played 20 years ago and play an Insomniac game that comes out in a week.
Right? That's a fair trade-off.
That's very interesting. I remember reading something about how Toys for Bob, who are the ones that are making the Spyro trilogy, they're actually pretty close by to where Insomniac is located. So they went over and were like, hey, can we look at design documents and see what's going on? And showed them their current work and was like, do you approve? And they got the thumbs up or whatever. I just thought that was kind of cute. It's kind of cool just to hear about. I mean, they're competitors clearly because they're not the same company, but it's just interesting to hear about companies getting along and sharing work, and it's just a nice feeling thing.
Well, it's like you said on the last podcast when referring to, Inafune leaving Capcom and a lot of the people in that company not wanting to, continue without him at the helm.
I really want to find that interview, because there was a big piece written about that a while back, and I think Inafune had some choice words to say when he left Capcom also, because he was just so frustrated with their corporate culture at that time.
Right.
So I'd really like to do some research and actually know, as opposed to getting secondhand knowledge. Right?
Sure. But I think that the sentiment still stands. People are making these games, right? So when you say, this company met with this company to go over and played well together, it's like, it's not the corporate entities, shareholders and stocks and big dollars. It's just some dudes.
Yeah.
Just some freaking regular old Joes, just getting together to talk video games.
Yeah, grab some coffee, chit chat about a game that came out 20 years ago, the cute purple dragon.
Yeah.
I don't know. That kind of stuff it warms me heart.
And I think the video game industry is better across the board when corporate relationships like that do exist.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like those games are going to be better off that team having met with the original team. Like, you know what I mean? Like it's just, we're going to get a better game for it.
Yeah. And even if it's really cheesy, I don't know if you watched the announcement trailer for Diablo 3 coming to Switch. Mm-hmm. The video with Reggie and whoever the CEO of Blizzard is, I think his name is Brian. They're just having this cute little fake Skype call. It's just funny to see, like, watch these two dudes interact. That are like, Blizzard hasn't put a game on a Nintendo console in like a long time, since probably the DS, I think.
I'd be a lot more of a fan of that if Reggie wasn't so useless to what Nintendo actually does. That sounds really shitty because he's a great meme and I'm sure he's a swell guy. But I find that a lot more adorable when it's, you know, Miyamoto or Sakurai doing something goofy, because those guys are actually doing something.
We can break down and I like try to figure out what is it that Reggie actually does. And I'm like, he's a forward-facing figure.
He's a PR guy.
Yeah.
For NOA, it does nothing.
If Miyamoto's in a video, he's in a PR role. And I think Reggie is he chief operating officer or chief executive officer of NOA?
I'm not sure. But again, NOA is basically all they do is localize and market games. They're not making games.
That's an important aspect, and to deciding what ventures they go on, right? If something sells really well, then that gives them incentive to continue doing that thing. And that's like part of what marketing does. It makes sure things sell well and give you the figures and the numbers back to the headquarters and say, hey, this was what this did. This drives traffic and blah, 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 all the nuance.
Was this in our group chat that got brought up and somebody said, he hasn't given us Mother 3 yet, so I don't give a shit or something? Was that our group chat? It's like, I was like, listen, Reggie ain't ever getting you nothing because he can't.
Yeah, to be fair, I also don't want to talk shit about Reggie because I don't want him to shoot fireballs at me or blast me with his laser vision.
What about Mother 3? I feel like that gets brought up on the podcast like every other episode. It's good. It's a good bit. But anyway, Spyro.
Delayed until November.
Yeah, mid-November. It's going to be fine. I'm not worried about it. But speaking of fucking janky games that released broken and prematurely and never got fixed, the Halo Master Chief Collection is somehow relevant again in 2018.
Yeah, this is a long time coming. They've been working on this for years.
So a couple of reasons here why this is in the mainstream again and being talked about. So to provide some context, this game came out, 3 years ago? 4 years ago?
I thought it was 2014 and Halo 5 was 2015.
Okay, so 4 years ago. Yeah, November 14. So on the surface, this was awesome. And to be fair, as a single player or a local co-op experience, it was awesome. I actually don't know. I'm trying to think if I actually played the Master Chief Collection couch co-op. Regardless, they ran well, kind of switching back and forth between the old graphics and the new graphics, the old sound and the new soundtrack. You know, I got a kick out of that. So I played through the first Halo and, enjoyed it for what it was. But one thing I never did was play online. And that is where this game was never able to get off the ground because the online was absolutely broken. Multiplayer was useless and remained that way for 4 years. And of course, Halo made Microsoft with the Xbox Live platform, or made the Xbox brand anyway. And, Halo continues to still be a strong selling franchise only because of that multiplayer aspect. And so for this Holy Grail collection to come out and have broken multiplayer, like what the fuck's up with that?
Yeah, that doesn't look good. That on top of how poorly the Xbox One launched was really just a big black eye for Microsoft.
Yeah, not a great couple of months there.
That's a year. Xbox came out 2013.
Oof. It's a rough 12 months.
Yeah, it's bad news.
So anyway, the Master Chief Collection is getting a little bit of an overhaul in anticipation of its release on the Xbox Game Pass, which comes at the beginning of the month, I believe. And so 4K resolution, HDR color. Cool. All right. Great.
And from what I understand, they really had to go through and completely retool a lot of those games just based on how kind of cobbled together they were initially, and then trying to remake it for a current generation, stuff falls apart. And some cool stuff they did was they re-rendered like cutscenes in 4K.
Right.
For those that care and like want that matters. But I just thought that was kind of interesting that they spent 4 years working on this game, and it's going to Game Pass, so it's not like they're going to be seeing a bunch of $60 like purchases coming from this. It's just Microsoft saying, hey, we screwed up and we're going to make good on it. And I like those kind of stories in games too. It's just like they're not going to make a lot of money off of doing this thing. It's just a make good.
You know, obviously a necessary step, not only considering Microsoft's missteps, but also, you know, Halo 5 did not sell gangbusters. It was pretty lukewarm in its reception. So for them to stick with this, and they're building more of that goodwill, obviously, and lead up to a inevitable Halo 6, right?
Infinite. It was already announced.
Infinite. Right. So many things be happening. They actually already released. Do you remember they released a remaster of Halo 3 ODST's campaign as like a, hey, we're sorry.
Yeah, that was their first make good. Yeah.
And so anyway, this is cool that they're doing it. Again, Microsoft is...
How about this, Microsoft? How about you give us Reach? Huh?
Well, they did make it backwards compatible, and that game was modern enough that I feel like that I don't need a remaster of that.
Was Reach the last Bungie Halo game?
I don't know. It's the last one I played, but I don't know.
I'm gonna go out on a very safe limb and say that it was. But it's interesting that they haven't remastered that one. I know it's the Master Chief collection, but I don't think Master Chief is in ODST, so they kind of screwed the pooch on that one anyway. So
what the fuck are we even doing? I've played all the Halo games in some capacity, some to completion,
right.
Some not. All of them, yes, I played the multiplayer. Halo Reach has the best Halo multiplayer. Do not at me.
I don't know if I ever played Halo Reach online.
Well, okay, so...
You have to make that distinction. That matters.
That's just true. I just mean as far as the pace of the game, the weapons in the game, the maps in the game, just the overall experience. We played couch co-op, split screen.
The DMR in the game. Oh,
baby. And being able to choose, like you had the jetpack or like sprint.
Yeah, the loadouts were interesting. I did like how in later games they just made it so you can always sprint,
which is sort of a first person shooter. Yeah, I mean, I feel like that's a necessary addition. So that's good. Anyway, good on you, Microsoft. Another
tantalizing game to be put on Game Pass. I feel like they're making a lot of money off of that service, and it's because it's a cool service. If I had an Xbox, I would use it.
Was it $10 a month?
I believe so.
I'm curious to know what games are on this service. Obviously,
all the first party games from
your Gears of War, your Halos.
Well, I don't know if any of the old ones are, but I know that going forward from when they announced it, it's all first party games are going to be day and date on Game Pass. So like Sea of Thieves and State of Decay 2 were both on there.
I'm not finding just a comprehensive list.
Yeah, I would imagine that it rotates. So sometimes stuff falls off, sometimes shit gets added, you know.
Honestly, this is a very enticing package.
You're probably getting like not the last of a AAA franchise, but maybe the game before that. So you're probably getting a lot of Assassin's Creeds in there. You probably even get like 2K18 in there and that kind of stuff.
Man, everything from PUBG to the Metro games to things like the Division, the new Just Cause game, like.
Well, not the new one. Just Cause 4 comes out in December.
Right. These are all upcoming. So it's like you're getting these staple, AAA experiences coming straight to the platform.
Just Cause 4 is going to be on Game Pass? Or is it going to be like if you have it, you get it for cheaper?
Unless I'm looking at the wrong list here, which I am liable to fuck this up. But I went to the Xbox Game Pass website and then clicked all Xbox One games. And that's the list I'm looking at. So unless it took me elsewhere.
That might just be all the Xbox One games, dude.
That would be very unintuitive.
That'd be super funny.
This website. Ignore everything I just said, folks. I'm done looking. I'm over Microsoft. I don't give a shit anymore. We're moving on. I do want to talk about a game that I feel like is going to be right up your wheelhouse. And I want to talk about it for a few reasons. Okay. But the game is Sekiro Shadows Die Twice.
Yeah, boy.
This is a From Software game, okay? Souls, Bloodborne. I mean, these are your kinds of games, right? So
yeah, but I mean, to be fair, I've only started playing them a couple years ago. It's a very new addition to my repertoire.
To be fair, you also only just got back in the games a couple of years ago.
Yeah, well.
So as an adult,
I've heard it both ways.
Fair. But you went ham on these games, man. Like you played through all 3 Souls games and then picked up Bloodborne.
I haven't played Dark Souls 2 yet.
Wait, you haven't?
No.
So you played 3 and then you went back to 1. Is that right?
Yeah, which I haven't beaten 1 either.
Well, goddamn. Fucking get good, dude.
I put in 30 hours like 2 separate times and kind of just fell off because other things happened. But once it comes out on Switch, that's the time I'll beat it.
That's the
then
time.
Dark Souls 2 I'll get around to after I beat Dark Souls 1, which hopefully I'll do before Sekiro, so I'll never play Sekiro.
You beat Bloodborne, correct?
Yes, I did. And I was just sort of playing through the DLC however long ago that was.
So I want to get your take here in just a sec as far as what you think of this game. But a couple things to note. First off, is this game something that From Software is confident in? Why are they releasing it? I'm hitting my fucking mic here. Why are they releasing this game in March?
That's where they release their games generally. April was when Dark Souls 3 came out. Bloodborne came out in March or April also. I think they've just found a good success in that window.
I wonder if the strategy is sort of, listen, we know our base and our base knows what they want and that's who's buying these games. So they can release it sort of in a lull in between some of the bigger releases and they're not going to be impacted one way or the other because, you know.
Yeah, I mean, if you are if you make a name for yourself in a way that From Software has and you have a very specific like niche audience that you're reaching, I don't think it really matters what time of year you're releasing. So, like you said, March, what else is coming out every year at March? They don't have to worry about the big AAA yearly franchises. And I don't think they're too bothered by like making quarters and like dealing with financials.
Right.
Especially because, interestingly enough, this game isn't actually being published by Bandai Namco or Sony. It's being published by Activision, which is very bizarre because Activision has not gone out of their way to publish something that they're not the ones developing in years.
Is that a testament to Activision's confidence in this title?
Perhaps. I'm not sure. It's interesting. It looks really good. And I feel like I'm waiting to hear more information about it. Like, I've seen a lot of gameplay and a lot of, well, not even a lot, but like I've seen gameplay. They've shown more gameplay at Gamescom. It's playable there. So that they've been kind of showing, hey, there's some cool mechanics. It's more stealth based. It's more action based. Also, it's not an RPG. I don't think you're leveling up stats like you are in the Souls games or in Bloodborne.
That strikes me as odd.
And it's a lot more mobile. There's a jump button. You have a grappling hook.
Love that.
You have this prosthetic arm that you swap out and you get different abilities based on it. Like one has a flamethrower, so you can shoot like a fireball. And then when you slash through it, your sword becomes a flaming sword. And then you can set enemies on fire with it.
I'm in. I'm already in.
So it's just, it's like, hey, this is like Dark Souls, but it's also not like Dark Souls at all. So I think that's a cool place to be exploring, especially from them. And I feel like they've been on the record, especially their head dude that's been behind the Dark Souls series, Miyazaki, where he's been like, this is the last Dark Souls game after Dark Souls 3. Don't really want to touch that series anymore. And they're so creative. You played Bloodborne and you had a moderate success with playing that, especially when you're playing co-op. But
yeah,
I'd be very interested to see what they do with Sekiro.
So here's where I stand on it. This game looks fucking beautiful. I was looking at gameplay before we started recording and it just looks gorgeous. But a couple of questions I have about it.
The camera seems pulled back a little bit further too, so you have a better range of vision. Seems like with the prior games, they've purposefully kept it close up behind your character, so you have a little more claustrophobic vibe. And also, you weren't very mobile in those games. Like, you didn't have a jump really. You kind of did, but it wasn't about moving around. It was more about, I don't want to be between a cliff and the enemy because I will be pushed off the cliff by the enemy.
Right.
Like your spacing was more like you had to pay very close attention to that. But it seems like this is more forgiving. You have a jump button. You have like I said, the grappling hook. The verticality is a different kind of exploration where you're actually going up as opposed to strictly falling down and trying to navigate that way. It's interesting. It seems like it's more empowering to you as a player, which isn't something they've really explored that much before. It's
the current year, and for any game not to have a jump button is ludicrous. Especially
even Zelda had a jump button.
Come on.
And it was on the X by default.
On.
Top button jump. I hope you can jump with triangle in Sekiro.
Ugh. Let's just really take us back to 2005 here.
Yeah, because that was so prevalent in 2005. I think it was only prevalent in like Shadow of the Colossus.
Well, that's what I automatically associate with like bad controls, is like mid 2000s PS2 games.
Just because you're bad at controls doesn't mean that they're bad controls.
Wow, dude. Get good. So this is interesting to me. A precipitous incline, okay, of Japanese samurai-inspired video games with Neo. Now we've got Sekiro coming out, going to be going toe-to-toe with Ghost of Tsushima.
Yeah, I mean, we have no idea when that's coming out. That could be a 2020 game.
Fair, it could be, but all of the hype surrounding it.
And Neo just got a sequel announced.
Right? So I'm curious. I'm not even curious. I'm confident this is what's happening. Is we just got wind that there's no Assassin's Creed next year. They're going to take another break, which I think is a great idea. The last time I took a break, they put out one of the best Assassin's Creed games.
Bro, did I tweet this out?
Wait, did you tweet this out?
I totally tweeted this. I swear to God, I must have. Either that or it's in the group chat. I called it AC Ronin.
Oh, you did tweet this out. You definitely did. Okay. How long ago was this? This was a couple days ago. But I have no doubt that it is happening now, just given... I mean, this is just like Ubisoft to like just be a little bit late. We're going to be coming on basically on the heels of 4 samurai games in the action platforming genre.
Well, yeah, I mean, these games are in development for years and years. I think when Odyssey was announced, they had said that they'd been working on it for 3 years. That game was in development while Origins was also in development. They were trading back assets back and forth, you know? That's
right.
That's the way Ubisoft does it. They've got like 50 studios worldwide, and they all just be like, hey, this is what I made. Check out my boat tech. We're really into boat tech. They love boats. They're making a game about boats.
What?
The Skull and Bones. It's an online boat game.
What do you like? Are you building boats? Are you sailing boats? Are you battling with boats?
It looks like the Black Flag combat on the boats, but it's PvP, where you're the boat and you're shooting other boats and you're getting treasure, and you have to navigate the wind. Have you not paid attention to the last 2 E3s? Who am I talking to?
Dude,
why do I have a video game podcast with you?
Bro, I pay attention to things I care about. And let me tell you,
the Ubisoft conference is wonderful. They always start with dancing pandas, and then Yves Guillemot has a nice little crying speech about, hey, we beat off Vivendi. We are finally free. Check out this game that's not coming out for 15 years. It's called Beyond Good and Evil 2. And they're like, hey, check it out. Just Dance 2019 coming out to the Wii. All right, now let's check out The Crew 2. Nobody cares? All right, let's go on to the next Assassin's Creed. It's lovely. It's a great conference every year. Big fan. Subscribed.
When this shit goes on and the conference is playing, I'm in the shower with the volume turned up just barely loud enough for me to kind of hear it in between.
That's a long shower. That was an hour and a half conference.
I'll catch the highlights. And if it's not on the highlights in my news feed, I don't know about it.
Boy,
I tell you what. Ubisoft is definitely finally going to Japan. I have no doubt about it after seeing just not only the popularity, but the success, sale-wise. I mean, Neo is...
Nah, dude. They're totally going to Norway next, and they're going to fight the God of War enemies.
Is that what's they're going to jump on that fucking bandwagon?
I don't know. I only bring that up because there's something in the God of War where it hints at, oh, check it out. There are these other mythologies that Kratos can totally attack. Like they show the Eye of Horus. And just recently they showed some behind the scenes, in dev stuff where they were tooling around with the idea of Kratos going to Egypt as opposed to the Nordic areas for this game. So it would have been really weird if that came out the same year or 4 months after Assassin's Creed.
That would actually be really cool. I'm sort of sick of the whole just the ancient Nord aesthetic. That's every RPG ever, I feel like.
But I mean, that's very
no, it's very tropey.
Inspirational for high fantasy because that's what Tolkien got a lot of his inspiration from, and that's what everybody else steals from. Right. He is the disseminator of the elves and gnomes and stuff.
Gnomes.
And the dwarves.
You don't go trolls or dwarves, you go gnomes.
I saw Frozen. I know what the love trolls are about. Okay?
I've never seen Frozen.
It's okay. It's not great. It's okay.
Well, anyway, Sekiro. It'll be cool. Something interesting that you brought up with me that I want to jump over to. As you can see, I'm really great at segues.
Yeah, that's what they call you, Segway EJ.
Seguije.
Seguije.
Hey.
It's your Italian name.
Oh, God. PlayStation, obviously, they've sold a fuck ton of units, 70 million worldwide.
80.
PS4, 80 million. Christ on a fuck.
Right? That was like the last thing. That was they haven't surpassed PS3 yet, but they're getting close.
Getting close.
And that was the, what would you call that? The catalyst for, they're selling a 500 million across all platforms.
Yeah.
They're selling that special edition PS4 Pro.
Which they only made 50,000.
Hey man, that's like way more than the 20th anniversary of PlayStation 1 they made.
That was extremely limited. But
yeah,
this is something that went up for pre-order the other day, sold out immediately.
They shouldn't have said how many they're making.
No, because that instantly made people who wouldn't have otherwise cared about it.
Turns into a chase product, and that's bad news. That's bad.
It's not like the thing wouldn't have sold anyway, right? Can I be honest with you?
Yeah, please. For once.
Everything everyone's heard from me on this podcast has been a lie. So initially, Nick, when this got brought up and everyone was, hemming and hawing and, ooh, look how beautiful this thing is. I was like, oh yeah, wow, oh wow. To be honest with you, the more I look at the thing and I've seen an unboxing, it's just like, I'm like, okay, it's a blue PlayStation. Like it's not gorgeous to me. It's a blue PlayStation, and it's made uglier by the fact that you can see like the little silver, like you can see the little shield that they put on the inside to protect your brain from falling out or whatever it does.
Right, that's what it does.
I'm just like, it's not that pretty. It's just a fucking dark blue PlayStation, and it's rare. I think, and I may have mentioned this before, but the PlayStation exclusive, the Spider-Man exclusive PS4 is gorgeous. I
would like the Spider-Man more if it wasn't as glossy. And I would like this one more if it wasn't as glossy either. It doesn't have to be like fully textured the way that the standard PS4 is, but it's just a little bit too reflective. Give it a satin sheen,
A satin sheen. All right. Give me that matte goodness.
Yeah. Give it that satin sheen.
Is that Charlie's brother?
Yes.
Fucking satin sheen.
He actually changed his name to Satin Estevez after his mother. I do like the controller a lot. I think that controller, I'm glad they're selling the controller and the headset separately. Hopefully they're going to make those in larger quantities because those are pretty cool looking. IMO. And I'm more into controllers than I am the console itself.
Well, I mean, because they're obviously so much cheaper and they're infinitely fucking collectible. You just get a rack of beautiful controllers. Like, there's nothing more satisfying.
And you can have two controllers and you're not like, well, what do I do with the other one? It's like, do you put it in the drawer and you use it sometimes? And also, it doesn't stick out and look weird in my entertainment console.
Right.
That's why I do like the dark blue. I think it'd be really funny if they went with that weird clear teal that they had for the PlayStation in Japan.
Right.
You've seen that? You know what I'm talking about? That would have been really funny just to be another little throwback.
Another little nod.
But I also, to be fair, I do like the copper. I will say that I do like the copper. I'm not too crazy about the shininess of the PlayStation 4, the plastic of it. And you're right that having those like radiation shields or the heat shields that they have on the inside makes it less enticing to actually see inside the guts of it. It's like, well,
it's just
why would I want to look at this?
It's clear plastic and a piece of sheet metal. Like it's.
I can't even see a circuit board. I can't even pretend to understand that this is what is making the game go.
It's just fucking ugly. But anyway, all of this was to say that PlayStation hit 7 million units in Japan.
Right. Compared to their 80 million worldwide.
But just to put this into perspective here, this is also compared to less than 100,000 Xbox units in Japan.
Yeah.
So
yeah, Xbox has never sold in Japan.
No, never had any fucking ground to stand on.
If you look at the media crate, because this is pulled from media crates, they make this information public as opposed to, it's way harder to keep track of how many retailers there are in the US, and all that stuff is secret for some reason because corporations and whatever. But media crates, they track, and I believe the PlayStation Vita,
right,
outsold all SKUs of the Xbox One by like tenfold this past week.
Wow.
I think 50 Xbox Ones sold in Japan last week.
I would love to speak to one of those 50 people who in 2018...
What about the people buying a PlayStation Vita?
Well, that makes plenty of sense given their market. Like, the Vita is affordable. There are a ton of great games. It's a nice little indie machine.
it's not that affordable.
I mean, you can go get one for like $150 right now.
Where?
I got mine for $150 on Amazon.
I don't know if you can get them for that cheap on Amazon. The last time I checked, they were selling for $200, and they had not gone down. And I was checking after you had bought yours. You must have gotten yours on a sale or something.
I must have. If you're spending $200 on a Vita, and it's between that and the Switch at $300, like, come on, you're fucking up.
And you have to spend another $100 just so you can store 2 games on your Vita anyway.
Yeah, that's true.
They're proprietary memory cards that never got cheaper. I think the PSP memory cards are still at MSRP, 15 years later. It's so egregious.
Right.
Just an interesting tidbit I wanted to share with you because I was talking about it last week.
Right.
About how PlayStation, they're doing better in Japan than they usually do, I think. I think PS3 wasn't doing that hot because it was so expensive. But just to put it in perspective, Nintendo Switch is not yet at 5 million, but getting close to 5 million in Japan.
The Switch?
Yeah, so that's like a quarter of their sales.
Yeah.
As opposed to less than a tenth of Sony's sales.
Well, the last thing that I want to jump to here before we send our listeners off to this interview with Milo, and I want to bring this up only because I have some recent experience with this, but you mentioned it to me earlier, the Vive wireless adapter that was announced, and we can pre-order starting next week.
Right, and I just shared that headline with you basically because I hadn't looked into it at all. I just saw that was a thing. And we saw it last year. There were some Chinese companies that were making wireless adapters for, I'm not sure if it was Vive or Oculus, but it was like, it wasn't an OEM kind of thing.
Right.
It was just sort of a kitsch bent kind of, hey, let's try to put it all together. We'll fake it till you make it.
Yeah, they couldn't have been worth using, right?
If they had the latency low enough. I haven't seen any firsthand impressions. I just remember, I think that was GDC 2017 where those were being demoed and people were saying, hey, yeah, I'm not getting sick. So you would get sick if you look to your left and then the screen looked to the left,
Right. Well, according to their advertisements, ultra low latency, like what does that actually mean in practice, right? Like what's that fucking millisecond response, brother? I need to know. I need some numbers.
It's got to have to be a very small response time.
Well, so on the website, it says that it requires an available PCIe slot on your PC. And so I'm like, okay, like that's promising that we're not going through USB cables and HDMI slots. We're plugging right into this bad bitch. And so that's promising. I was actually just using, at the time of this recording, I was using the Vive last night.
Oh, really? What were you doing?
I was at a coworker's house and they were doing a little VR night, which basically turned into us just playing Beat Saber.
Dude, that game looks so much fun.
It's, for our listeners out there who may not have heard of this, it is Guitar Hero with lightsabers. And so each hand with the Vive setup is a different colored lightsaber. And you put the VR headset on and you've got the musical notes.
The chart, as it were.
Right, rushing at you. So you're not only hitting the blocks as they pass you, but you're also, there are arrows on them, so you have to go in a particular direction, right?
Right.
But then there are also stage hazards, so you have to duck, you have to jump side to side to avoid these big blocks or these big walls coming towards you. So looking or watching somebody doing this is absolutely ridiculous. What I did learn, Nick, as an aside, not a very good party game. You get a kick out of it at first, watching someone look like an idiot, but like next thing you know, you just got a room with 9 people watching one person fucking play a 5-minute song. Everyone just kind of sits there on their phone waiting for their turn. It's not a really good party game, the way Guitar Hero is.
Well, I think even Guitar Hero falls apart if you get that many people going, unless you've got something like Rock Band where you have individual people being able to play different instruments.
Right.
At least get 4 people going in Rock Band.
It was funny. We were setting up, and my buddy's got his PC, and he's setting up the perimeter with the sensors all the way around the room, and
the chaperone.
Right. He's getting everything set up, and it took like half an hour, and I'm like, wow, man, VR, very intuitive. The future of gaming. Like he's destroying the living room and hanging cables across. So anyway, this wireless adapter is interesting to me because I feel like not just expediting the process of setup and teardown and actually jumping in and playing, but just the freedom of movement. When I was playing, I had to face with my back to the TV, so I'm staring at everybody sitting on the couch awkwardly, and even though I'm in a headset, it's just weird. They're all just looking right at me, and I couldn't. If I tried to move because I'm dodging these pillars and these walls, trying not to get Star Fox into a million pieces. I'm tethered to this giant cable hanging down the back of my head.
Your predator braid.
Right, which is super sick in concept, but then you wear it and you're just yanking back and forth and you feel like you're gonna rip the whole thing off the fucking back of the computer.
Yeah, it seems like that'd be very unimmersing.
Right, so this is the next step in virtual reality. Kind of hacking those fucking tethers off. And I'm all about it. I'm all about pushing this technology forward. And, again, I don't think this is the future of video games. It's sort of a lateral movement. It's its own, piece of the pie. And that's cool. And
yeah, I'd put it up there with like touchscreen gaming. It's a different input, It's
right.
sort of, I would say it's kind of close to that.
Right. And it changes the way you interact with things, and it changes the things you can do, and that'll push developers to be more creative, and that's cool. I want to see what the peak of that technology in this, form, what it looks like. And this is the next step to getting that.
Hell yeah.
So,
into that.
Yeah.
That, and then next will be what people call inside out tracking, where instead of having, because you said you were playing a Vive, did you have like the towers for the cameras in the corners of the room?
Yeah.
So what an inside out tracking does, it puts the cameras on the headset itself. So then you don't need cameras pointing at you, you have cameras pointing out, and that just automatically tells, oh, there's a wall this far away, because it has like infrared, that kind of stuff.
That can't be too far away. That has to be right around the corner.
And then other stuff like different controller support and having a controller that's more like a glove, I feel like would be really cool in a VR scenario.
Glove.
Power glove, it's so
Bring
bad.
it back. I love it.
We need the Wizard 2 with VR power gloves.
What podcast was I just listening to where they just kept talking about the Wizard?
I don't know, but it's a great movie apparently that I haven't actually seen, but I know it's pretty much just a big ad for Super Mario Brothers 3.
Oh, is it really?
Yeah, it was actually like sponsored by Nintendo, I think, because he's going to the Nintendo World Championship.
Oh, okay.
And they're playing Super Mario 3 before the game came out.
Ooh, whoa.
Little fun fact, Fred Savage,
Can you imagine if that happened today?
Young Wonder Years boy.
Right. Him and his adorable little afro.
Beautiful man.
I think that's all that's on our list today as far as sort of news stuff goes. The last thing that I want to talk about, and I wish I had let off with this now that I'm thinking about it, but we're here. We're an hour in.
Clever editing. Anything is possible.
Anything is possible! Shouts to my boy, Kevin Garnett. We talked about in the last podcast games we've been playing. I think we briefly mentioned Dead Cells as something you had touched, something that I was interested in maybe looking at. I don't know if we actually did or not, or if that was off pod, but...
Well, I mean, we mentioned it in the context of the plagiarism scandal, but I was more hoping that you would be getting to Octopath Traveler this week so we could finally talk about that, but I feel like that is something that you have not played, I'm guessing.
No, because I got absolutely sucked into Dead Cells.
That's awesome.
And Nick, I told you this before, but I think roguelikes are my genre, or at least one of them.
Good ones, at least.
I mean, I've only played 3 roguelikes, to my knowledge. I'm trying to think here, but to my knowledge, I've only played 3, and I've loved all 3. The 3 being Binding of Isaac, Rogue Legacy, and now Dead Cells.
I would say those are 3 roguelites, not roguelikes.
Ooh, explain to me the difference here.
It's the difference between Final Fantasy VI being an RPG and the new Assassin's Creed being an RPG. It's more further away from the inspiration, from the source material.
So this is more of an amalgamation of a variety of genres and subgenres that make a unique experience than...
Right, because the roguelike genre is more narrow than the games that you've stated. Most roguelikes do not have any progression whatsoever between runs, which you don't like.
Okay. Nope. Absolutely not.
So you don't like roguelikes.
Okay.
You like roguelites because you like that sense of progression and getting a little bit further each time, not based on purely your merit and luck, but based on both your skill improving, but also there are numbers going up.
Yeah.
And you're getting more tools to help you traverse and defeat enemies and explore the area in which you're thrown into.
Okay. You learn something new every day, Nick. So it's a roguelite that I have taken to. And, Binding of Isaac is like a twin stick shooter.
Right. It's like Zelda if it was a twin stick shooter.
Right.
Like top down OG Zelda.
Right. And, Rogue Legacy is an action platformer, as is Dead Cells. So you also picked up Dead Cells and you played a little bit, but I'm assuming you only probably put in 2 hours or so.
If that, I mean, of actual playtime, maybe half an hour to an hour. A lot of it was just sitting around because I was over hanging out with friends and I just bought it and was tooling around with it, trying to see if I could pick up what was different from when I played it in early access last year.
Okay.
Because that's when I first heard about it and I checked it out on Steam and it was a much more bare bones experience, but it was still like very playable in its early access state. They just sort of added some more, I guess, enticements to keep you playing. Like there weren't any people that you could talk to when I played it.
Oh, okay. Right off the bat, you jump into this game and it doesn't burden you with, tons of dialogue or trying to, no story setup. The narrative is very sparse. It's interesting enough for what it is and for what's there, if that's what you're into. But for me, it's just, I want to get plopped down and I want to play the damn game. Right.
Right. It's just mostly just colorful and a person saying, oh yeah, you can't die now.
Right.
And every time you do die, you just get plopped down as your weird jelly body. And then you inhabit another corpse, and then that's you now.
Right when you jump into the game, you notice how fast the combat is, which I'm a huge fan of. I'm a gunner. We've talked about this. I'm a gunner, dude. I want to get in. I want to get my hands dirty. I don't creep around. I'm not a stealthy player. I'm not a ranged player. I just want to get in and smash buttons and make some shit happen.
You like the Dynasty Warriors type games.
That's almost a step too far, but that's almost too mindless. The thing about this game is you get in, you can hack, and you can slash. But
I'm just saying that, like, to hyperbolize your preferred play style.
Sure, yeah.
So go in and just beat the crap out of stuff. Willy upon nilly.
Willy upon nilly. I'm not a patient man by any stretch of the imagination. So getting in and just bloodying people up with my fists feels good, man. So you jump in. I'm hacking and slashing. Not to say there isn't a ranged option. You can play ranged if you want.
Right, because the way the game works with drops is, like, there's different weapon classes and there's a loot system where, oh, well, these are better than these. I've got red weapons, I've got green weapons, I got blue weapons, and you've got different systems that interact with that where you'll find, I can upgrade either red, green, or blue. And if I've got 2 green weapons, that I definitely want to try to upgrade my green weapons because that's what I'm using right now. Or if I think I'm going to get a red weapon later, then I might want to try to steer myself that way. So it's like an on-the-fly kind of RPG spec system where you have like a skill tree almost. And then on top of the temporary ones that you get per run, you are saving up these cells that you get from occasionally defeating enemies or beating the harder elite type enemies. You'll get more cells, and you trade those in to the collector, I believe that guy's name is. And he's only between stages, so it's a lot fewer and further between that you actually get to interact with this guy. But then you're spending those to get more permanent upgrades where you'll get a health flask where you can heal yourself, or you can upgrade that and get multiple swigs off of the health flask, or you'll unlock weapons with blueprints, or you can buy the blueprints from this collector. It's just, it kind of opens up different, you've got short-term goals and then you've got long-term goals.
Right.
And it's very satisfying to interact with both of those kind of systems.
So one thing that a game like Rogue Legacy does, where you die, you take all that gold, and you go invest it in perks and upgrade your character. But every time you get stronger, so do the enemies on the map. So it's sort of you're growing, but so are the enemies, so you never quite feel like, oh, I'm going to blow through, I'm going to be OP.
The enemies in Rogue Legacy only get stronger if you New Game Plus it.
Wait, really?
Yeah.
So if I max my character, that first area is going to be just as simple as the first, or going to be much more simple to get through than...
Yeah, you'll like one-hit enemies. You'll just breeze through, and then you'll go to... Rogue Legacy is a very... I feel it's a very appropriate kind of comparison because of the way Dead Cells is kind of laid out, where it's sort of Metroidvania-esque, where the first thing you get is a rune that allows you to interact with these plants on the ground, that when you have the rune and you tickle them, a vine goes upward and allows you to access areas that you haven't been able to access before. So it gives you traversal options. The way it's set up, it's procedurally generated each time you die, but it's sort of it's sort of always in the same location. Like if you go right, but sometimes it's left. I'm not sure how the regeneration works in Dead Cells yet. I haven't played it enough. But in Rogue Legacy, it was procedurally generated also. But it was basically always, if you go straight right, you'll end up in the forest. And if you go up, you'll go in the attic. And if you go down, it'll be the spooky dark dungeon area.
Right.
And they'll have different bosses in those locations. But in Dead Cells, I feel like I've sort of gotten the hint of it's the toxic sewers are usually down here, and then if I keep going, then I'll maybe find the ramparts. But I haven't really gotten my head around that yet. I'm not certain yet.
So far, so the toxic sewers is its own thing that you get to from the first area, but so far outside of that, everything is very, very linear. You're going from left to right. Sometimes you kind of have to kind of go down a little bit, but you're going from one end of the map to the other, and it's very linear in the sense that, okay, you know which stage is next. Rogue Legacy is open where you can go to any area of the world right off the bat, right? Right out of the gate, you can head to any area and fight any boss you want. This one is way more linear in the sense that it's like, okay, I've got to go from the prison, and I've got to get to the promenade. I've got to go to the ramparts. Then I got to go to Blackbridge to fight the first boss. Okay, there's no other order I can really do that in.
I got to the ramparts from the toxic sewers.
Okay, so that must be where it differs then, because I've only been to the sewers once, and you can't unlock the sewers until you go to the promenade. You get the rune that lets you climb the vines or grow the vines.
Right, yeah. You're right in that it gates it differently, where Rogue Legacy gates it behind skill and the enemies like one-shotting you. This gates it more in a tangible aspect where you just don't have the means to get to the next area.
Right. So that's the one of the things that does frustrate me is you can spend all this time exploring, and the whole crux of the game is to get these cells so that you can upgrade so that the next time you go through, your run is easier. You start with better weapons, you start with better perks that'll help you stay alive longer. Okay. But the progression is so slow. You go through and you can get, my best run was 40 cells, but that was like an insanely good run. Usually it's like maybe 10. So between each level, you're going to spend these cells, and it's like, oh, I need 600 to unlock this perk. Like, it's really slow in its progression. And so that has been a little bit of a blocker for me, where I just feel you put in all this work and you run for half an hour, 40 minutes, and at the end of it, it's just like, well, I'm dead, and I'm kind of right back where I was at the beginning of the last run. You don't feel the progression is so incremental. You don't really feel that you're starting each run, on a higher rung, and it's so that satisfaction is diminished a little bit. But then when you do finally make that leap, it's a significant enough leap that you feel, oh, okay, here we go. But I'm still in the early game, so I'm unlocking things that cost 35 cells, 60 cells. Once it starts climbing up, where it's going to cost hundreds to unlock, this incremental upgrade. It's just, I feel like that's going to be where I kind of hit my wall and say I'm over this. But as far as actually traversing the world, the platforming is really concise. Like it's quick. It's things like when you're roll dodging, there's an option that'll like automatically keep you from falling off a ledge, which I think is, some people might think like, oh, that's cheating, or that's Babby's first whatever. But for me, it's like, that means I can just focus on fighting the enemies and not worrying about falling off to my death, which is like, at any point in the game, you can fall to your death. Maybe that makes it easier on me and that's cheap or whatever, but it just lets me focus on the thing that I want to be doing, which is just fucking slashing things up. The Metroidvania aspects, I think, are really cool. We mentioned the rune that lets you grow the vines. So suddenly that opens up, and that, opens up a whole new area in the game. The sewers or whatever. I get the sense that there are going to be a couple other ones that'll unlock pretty quick here, like scaling walls.
Yeah, there's very specific locations where you'll see two walls that are very close to each other. Like, I bet I'm going to get a wall jump.
Yeah.
Or you'll see the sarcophagus and you can rub the sarcophagus and you're like, oh, that doesn't do anything.
Yeah.
It'll probably do something eventually.
Yeah. Probably sooner rather than later, it'll do something there. One of the other things that pertains to the whole Metroidvania aspect that I really, really love is that at every divergent path, there's a teleporter. So it acts as a checkpoint. So if you get to a spot where you can go up, right, or down, you activate the checkpoint, and then you pick any direction you want. And when you get to the end of that path, or another divergent path, there's another teleporter. So one of my biggest issues with Metroidvania games, as someone who's just a little obsessive compulsive, right, and I have this completionist tendency, which always ruins games for me because I never actually 100% anything, but I have to play the game as if I'm going to, right?
Right.
So this is great because I can, without fear, pick any direction, explore that to its fullest extent, find all the little secrets, kill all the enemies, gather all my cells, and then know that I can quickly look at my map and say, oh, I have completely tapped out this direction. I can just, boom, teleport back to that divergent path, go that other direction. So it's sort of a little security for me that no matter what I do, I can always go back to where I started this. And I'm not going to feel like by the time I get to the end of the level, I've left any secrets behind, which is not a good feeling, man. When you're playing a game like that and you feel like, ooh, did I miss something? And it just eats at you. It's like, no, I know. I completed everything I could on this run. That feels really good. And some people may take issue with that because that's sort of the, I guess, one of the selling points of a Metroidvania game is the exploration.
Yeah, which the more I think about it, the more I feel like this game has almost nothing to do with Metroidvanias except for the fact that it gates you from going places until you get like an item. It's like saying that Ocarina of Time is a Metroidvania. I mean, it just doesn't fit, right? I think it just sort of looks and feels like one at times, but in practice, it's just an action platformer. Because there's no backtracking. Once you go to the ramparts, you can't go back to the promenade.
And so again, I guess that this is more of a, an amalgamation where it's clearly drawing inspiration from the Metroidvania genre, but it's doing its own thing with it, which is to be commended, It's taking the things that I like about Metroidvanias and, not bloating it with all of the things that frustrate me about them. So
yeah, which that's cool. I do want to touch back with you in like a week or two, see if you've kept up with it and whether or not your problems with the long-term progression has deterred you from taking part in the short-term progression and how you interact with those kind of that duality.
I'm already kind of frustrated after, so I started the game. I couldn't even, the first couple of times, I couldn't even get out of the promenade. I ran into the elite mob. There'll be elite versions of them that are way, way tougher than a typical creature you're fighting. And he's guarding the rune that lets you traverse the world a little more with those vines. And so I tried to beat him like 6 or 7 times. Like every time I just could not get the hang of, when to dodge is not the issue, right? Because this game sort of telegraphs it with a little exclamation point when you need to roll dodge to avoid an enemy's attack.
Which I do like you have the option to turn that off because I feel like I'll do that once I get the rhythm down. But it was very difficult to play this game while you're trying to hold a conversation with someone else. It's not a game that you can half focus on.
Not easy.
So I was having trouble with that, and I really want to because I was playing it in handheld mode, and
also not ideal.
I didn't have the volume up, so I was just missing out on a whole lot of aspects of the game that
totally.
I feel like were hindering me in a way that I felt I wasn't doing as well as I wanted to. And nothing feels worse than being like, man, I'm just not playing this game right, and it's my fault.
I need you to just get the Pro Controller, pop on some fucking headset, and play on the TV. But
yeah, okay, I'll get my headphones that reach all the way to my Switch in front of my TV.
Stupid Switch. You have to... Damn it. Fucking Nintendo. But anyway, I couldn't get past that guy initially. It took forever. And I was kind of like, okay, well, that was fun while it lasted. But I persevered, Nick. And then I got to the promenade, or I got to the ramparts. And I felt a little more like, okay, I'm getting the hang of the combat. I'm getting a hang of sort of what kind of build I like. Because, you're going through the world and you're getting, like you said, you're getting upgrades to your HP, to the type of weapons you're using, whether it's your, you've got traps, you've got melee, and you've got ranged weapons.
You've got like grenades.
The traps are not traps, it's survival is the category. So for the 3 upgrades you can get. And so generally that ends up being melee ranged traps or grenades or something like that.
Or like HP or defense or, like HP recovery, I think is a survival.
Right.
Because after each area, also after you talk to the collector, you can also talk to another guy and get these mutations. And usually what I'll do is I'll do the one that heals you for 2 HP after each kill you get.
Ooh, okay. So I always go right off the bat with the one that lets you revive. You get a free revive if you die. Here's why. Initially, it was because I couldn't get through that elite before without getting it. And so now I've kind of been in that habit. So what I do, and here's where some of my frustrations come into play. I don't know, I probably played 10 hours in the last couple of days, and I've done a ton of runs. I'd be curious to go look at my stats, but I finally got to the boss. on Blackbridge, which I guess you haven't gotten to yet.
I feel like I might have seen him on the PC version, but I don't remember.
Okay, yeah. He was really difficult. He killed me really quick. At first, it was like, okay, if I just play carefully and I dodge carefully, I can do this. Well, then he starts breaking out, the big guns, and things get kind of crazy. So I fought him another like 4 or 5 times, I want to say, before I finally got a really good grasp on like, okay, what's the strategy for beating this guy? And then I had to start playing my runs completely differently, building a new loadout. Or it's like I really want to focus on traps and building up the purple side of the tree, whatever that is. I can't remember the name, but so that's what I'm focusing on. Building, high HP. Okay, now I'm going and selecting my mutations. What do I do? So before I was selecting free revive, which I still use, and I was doing one that does like times 100 and some damage for 15 seconds after killing an enemy. Cool. Very helpful when you're on a run, but when you go into the boss, you want to reset your mutations, and you want, what I found the combo was plus 30% HP. I still had my revive when I beat the boss. And then the third one, what did I do for the boss? Because I got rid of the extra damage.
Right, because you're not going to be generating higher DPS unless he's got ads that you can take out.
So the other one is it halves the cooldown of your mutations, of your traps. And so the key is to just get a shit ton of traps. One will drop 2 traps that'll bind him, and one that you can lay far away and it'll do damage from afar. And then the key is to
turrets.
The turrets, yeah. So, again, it took 4 or 5 tries before I finally figured out the strategy, and then another like 2 tries before I beat him. But it's just hammering the guy with range attacks until he, you can get close enough to hit him. And then rinse, repeat, and just hope those traps do their job. And, so by the time you finally beat him, I really felt that satisfaction of, the progression of, holy shit, where I was 2 days ago versus where I'm at now, understanding the game, getting stronger. Each run's a little easier because these things I'm unlocking. Well, then you go to the next area, and it's just like bonkers difficult. And I die almost right away. Okay, now I'm back to square one. I got to do all that again and run all the way back through and fight the boss. And I don't feel like even though my understanding of the game is much better, at the end of the day, all I've really done is unlock the ability to retain gold after a death. And I have 2 potions now instead of 0. Other than that, like, I have a couple of weapons unlocked that aren't that great. And one of the downsides to unlocking weapons after each run with your cells is now those spawn in the world. So half the time now I'm getting shit weapons that I only unlocked because I needed to unlock X amount of weapons to like unlock more perks.
Right.
So now I'm getting these crappy drops in the world that I never planned on using these weapons. And now half the time it's ruining my runs because I'm getting just bogus items.
Have you gotten to a time door when it was still open yet?
I have once, yeah.
That has been the way I've been playing mostly, is like, oh, I don't have to really fight these trash mobs. I'm just going to run through and try and look for the time door in the second area, like in the promenade. And then usually I'll get some like good stuff from there. Get like 10 cells or something without having to like worry about fighting a bunch of enemies and losing a bunch of life for really nothing.
Maybe that's the key, because I'm curious exactly what ends up down there, because it's my understanding that these time doors in each level after the first area, if you get to it before the time is up, down there you'll find, I think, all of the items you passed on in the previous level.
I'm not sure if it's all of them, but it's at least like 2 chests and then a cache of cells or gold.
So the downside being you're missing up on the HP and gear upgrades, but you're rushing through, skipping a level, getting as many cells as you otherwise probably would have.
And usually finding something pretty decent too.
So I imagine that is going to be the key once I get to a point where I'm OP enough at the start of a run, where I have really good starting weapons, I can buff my HP.
Or if you just want to try and explore and try and, like if you were banging your head up against that boss for more runs, then you would just be like, okay, I'm just going to rush to him and just sort of whatever I get. And then I could try out different methods and see if I can figure out the right way to fight this guy, so that he'll be it'll be more trivial the next time I fight him, and then I can spend more time exploring and really poking around the corners of the dungeon.
Yeah, I'll be curious to see how things play out in the next day or two, because I'm still gonna give it the old old college try here, keep going, but I have a feeling that if I don't make much more meaningful progression, because the runs just get longer and more stressful. Now instead of a 5-minute run, it's a 10-minute run. Instead of a 10-minute run, it's like I'm up to like a 40-minute run. That's not a small time commitment. Just to go back.
So that's why I brought that up, just to see maybe if that'll be more conducive to the way you want to play. I'd be interested to hear your feedback from that.
Yeah, we'll follow up on that next week, and hopefully you'll have played more by then.
Oh, I'm planning on it. I think I'm going to be spending some time with it during the week.
Very glad. But anyway, we've been recording for an hour and a half. We still have this next segment to get into. This has been the Console Crusade podcast. Again, we are throwing you to a segment we recorded earlier in the week with Milo Kent-Pettit, an aspiring game developer. He talks with us about a short game he just developed that Nick and I both played, both beat.
We'll have a link for it in the description.
We'll blast that out on our social media. Of course, you can find us on Twitter. I am at eJiggle. Nick is at Press Till Death. You can find the Console Crusade at console_crusade. And again, please email us, tweet us, questions, comment, concerns. We're going to start doing listener mail now that we've actually blasted this information out to the world. And we'll answer your questions. We'll talk about whatever y'all want to talk about. I know you're out there. Again, I read our stats. I know you're out there. Write into us.
We're huge in Japan.
Hey, half our listener base is out there.
Somehow. I don't know.
A couple of people in Sweden,
Shouts out to Sweden,
Yeah, my people.
They don't hear enough, but shouts out.
Yeah, appreciate it. Anyway, Console Crusade podcast. We'll catch you guys next week.
Yeah, that's fucked up. There's Starman and Earthbound and the bad guys, and there's Starmans and Mario, and they just make you invincible, and you get a cool little 2-note little ditty.
It's very confusing. There's no consistency among Nintendo properties.
Wasn't David Bowie a Starman? Or is he just Ziggy Stardust?
Ziggy Stardust.
Is close. He's half a Starman.
Yeah.
Who's the guy in Kiss with the star face?
It's the Star Child, Paul Stanley. Okay. You ignorant slut.
Sorry.
Well, on that note, this is the Console Crusade podcast. Impromptu episode. All right, my name's EJ Olson. I am joined today, as always, by Nick Durheim.
Hey, hello.
And again, for the second time ever, Mr. Miles Kent-Pettit.
That would be me, but I go by Milo.
Did I say Miles? Did I say Miles? See, it's your Skype name.
Eric John.
Yeah. Sorry. Listen, the Skype name completely messed me up. Like, I keep saying Miles. Did I say Miles again? Milo.
Miles was my father.
Yes, let us be correct here. Actually, my father was Joe.
There's no connection here at all. I know your name, Milo. It's confusing me.
It's really not coming through, EJ.
It's like when people call me Eric, I'm like, I guess that's my name. Yeah, that's weird. Like, that's uncomfortable. But anyway.
Eric's your uncle.
It's weird. And John's my dad, so when people call me Eric John, I'm like, just stop it. This isn't right. So we're doing a really weird thing right now. Milo is in town visiting before he jets off to his next adventure, which we're going to talk about. It's so hard not to put my elbows on this table right now. So, Milo, you and I are together, sitting across from each other. Not uncomfortably close, as you pointed out, but still awkwardly leaning into each other into one mic. So our audio might be a little weird. And we have Nick queued up on Skype over here.
I'm going to sound the best out of the three of us.
It's true. He's recording his own audio. And so, it's just an interesting experiment. You guys should have seen the lead up to this. We were trying Skype, group chats, freaking Zencast, all these different things trying to get this to work so that we can both hear Nick, Milo, and Nick can hear the both of us without any echo. It was kind of a mess. We think we have it solved.
It did take about an hour, so you can tell that some craftsmanship went into it.
Yeah, so y'all better appreciate this episode. I demand it of you. Anyway, so Milo, last we spoke, you were living in Minneapolis. You'd done a couple of was it 72 hour or like
48 hour.
48 hour. Oh gosh.
Yeah, tiny bits of time.
You had 48 hours, a seminar to basically create, design, implement an entire video game.
Yep.
So we talked about that. And your last game, what was that called? Sorry, the one that we talked about in the last pod that I had played with Scaling the Mountain.
That one was Mountaineer, and it was a broken mess of a prototype of a game. But it looked pretty.
But, as I sip on my LaCroix here, that was... Nick, stop it. Hey, it's not a Console Crusade podcast, so I'm not sipping on LaCroix when I should be talking.
I can't help when it's comedy gold,
Yeah. That was sort of a launching off point for you, where you got together with this group of people, and because if I recall, your first game did not come to fruition within the 48 hours. Is that correct?
That's right. That one was a broken mess of not even a prototype. That was a broken mess of people who were just arguing for 48 hours and then came up with half of a walking simulator.
So you mean like half of all indie developers currently trying to develop in the game space?
Exactly, yeah.
Half broken walking sim.
No, it wasn't half broken. It was just half a walking simulator.
Oh, okay.
Let's get it correct.
So that was half a success.
Stumbling simulator.
A stumbling simulator, yes.
Here you are, coming off the heels of having developed your second game.
Correct. And this one was made in co-development with my girlfriend, of all people.
Awesome. She is
Isabel, and she is fantastic. She does a lot of visual art and acting, and she's one of the most incredible actresses I've ever seen, hands down. And same goes for visual art. But I'm not a programmer, and she is not an animator, and yet we went and made a game anyways.
And let me preface, we're about to get into kind of what this game is and what it looks like and how it plays, because you showed up today and you told me about it, and I went and played it. I told Nick about it. Nick went and played it. We both beat the game.
Hey.
So we'll kind of dive into that and our thoughts on that, and then we're going to kind of grill you. And it's going to be interesting to kind of get your perspective as someone, you watched me play it, right?
Yep.
So that's, I'm sure as the developer, an interesting experience.
Showing someone a game that you made, I would imagine, EJ, you probably get similar experiences when you edit together a video and you're like, oh, I know what I did to make this happen, and they're just seeing the final product. So, but it's a little bit different with a video game because the person's interacting with it even more, and they can break it in ways that a viewer can't necessarily break a video.
Right.
So I think that's kind of interesting to get that kind of duality, that kind of difference, but similar, because video games and videos are probably the closest two mediums to each other, because I don't think video games are super unique because people play them.
Right.
Yeah, it's hard to watch a movie wrong.
Yeah, you just miss things and that's about it. And then you can hear smarter people talk about it and like, oh yeah, I kind of get it now, but
It's hard to watch a movie wrong. Some insight from not Milo Kent-Pettit.
That is my real name. It's all hyphenated.
Well, what's interesting is you kind of have this unique perspective, and we talked about it before, as a performer, as a former actor. I don't know if that's still something you're pursuing or not, but theater and acting for film is, you have this interest and love for storytelling, and so how as accurately as possible sort of translate what the games industry has been trying to do, and we've been seeing them move closer towards. But as Nick likes to point out, video games are still the worst vehicle for telling a story.
At least a traditional story. Like, I feel like video games are much better at establishing a place and a setting and like a world, but it's not good at linear storytelling that we're used to. Like, you can't do a 3-act structure in a video game, at least not the way that we've done it for hundreds of years. So video games are a super new medium. They've only been around really for about 30 or 40 years. So we're just now breaking the surface of that. And you're seeing people, walking simulators is a very popular genre because it's very linear. It's very similar to how people would make a movie, except you're controlling the camera.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'm just interested to see what the future is in video games where your actions are what's driving the story, and if that's even a possibility, because people can play video games. People like the freedom to explore a world and interact with the world in a way. And I think that is probably the most, that's the most interesting stories that you get from video games are when you break the game and something funny happens and you tell your friends about it. And that people talk about that all the time, playing Breath of the Wild or Grand Theft Auto, or you're flying into a building and one of the NPCs parachutes out on top of you and something explodes. Like, that's just like a funny story. And you can't get that from a movie. You can't discover something in a movie in that same way, or in a book, or in a dialogue even. So I think that's kind of interesting to see where video games can take us and what the possibilities are, and to keep exploring that.
Right. It's interesting to see how the way we observe and process these different stories, how that's evolved and how it's different from reading a book or watching a movie. But there's a movement where we're trying to take what it's like to watch a movie, translate it to a video game. And every year we're getting a little bit closer. We have games like Detroit, right? Or, even games like Last of Us, which is heavier on the gameplay, but still very heavy in the story elements. But there's still this large gap that we're trying to close. And so that's Milo, that's one of your passions, is how can I be creative and solve these problems that no one's been able to solve yet, and tell these stories in a unique way. So your new game,
Where the Ferns Don't Grow, for those of you who don't know, and I assume that's most.
we can find that on itch.io.
You got it. I just keep trying to talk over you here, and it's not
Nailed
working.
it. This is good. This is in my brain now. If I reiterate it, I will remember. Well, we're going to put a link all over social media for this, so all of our listeners are going to go find this and they're going to go play it. So, Milo, I want you to break us down on what this game is before Nick and I kind of get into our experience playing it.
Yeah, Where the Ferns Don't Grow really started with Isabel and I's desire to create a game that was more than just, oh, let's shoot a bunch of people in the face, because I feel like a lot of those just fall flat, and we're tired of them. We watched E3, and it was like 95% of the games were generic shoot people in the face, realistic graphics kind of a thing. And so
Very formulaic.
Right. Part of this is born out of rebellion, but we really wanted to create something that I call it that touches the human soul, right? That gets at deeper human truths and just so happens to be carried through the medium of video games. And so that's what we were aiming to do with Where the Ferns Don't Grow. And so this game is a game, first and foremost, about taking responsibility for your life and what that could look like, what that could feel like in your everyday life. And you don't have to in this game. You might get a very unsatisfying resolution, but you don't have to. As far as the gameplay goes, it borrows a lot from platformers, but unlike platformers, in this particular game, you're going to be creating your own way forward. There's these materials in the cave that you will throw against the cave walls in order to navigate. And you'll also have a companion, a cute little creature. Our development name for the creature is Ping Pong, so that's how we refer to them in code and to ourselves.
Perfect.
Apropos.
And so you carry this cute creature with you as you go about solving what's essentially a giant puzzle. But again, we can talk about more of the design decisions and what I've learned and where I screwed up and where I feel I did well. And of course, Isabel's fantastic artwork and animation.
Yeah, so that's the first thing I noticed was, especially, I mean, obviously these are very two different beasts, right? Going back to Mountaineer versus Where the Ferns Don't Grow. The first thing you notice is it launches, you got this beautiful start screen, and just the art is very simple, very lovely. And Nick, I keep touching the damn table. Nick, tell me if this tracks with you. I got Journey vibes from, like, if Journey, obviously it's a very different kind of game, but as far as the feel, as far as just the atmosphere and sort of the emotions that came with this sort of this empty longing, like you're not really sure where you're at or what you're doing. I feel like if you would have taken Journey, condensed it into this 2D sprite-based game, in some ways, I feel a lot of that influence in here. Am I off track?
I get the minimalist vibes, especially with like the minimal color palette. You get that a lot with Journey. And I was thinking, when I first booted it up, it gave me a strong like Atari kind of vibe with the color palette and just the size of the pixels. It didn't give me like an 8-bit vibe. It gave me like proto 8-bit kind of vibes. So I liked that. And then obviously the sound design that you went with was very haunting and ominous and not really, it doesn't like stick with you. It's just sort of happening while you're playing, kind of a static kind of sound. So I thought that pushed it forward as well.
Milo, when you guys are from an artistic direction, when you're planning this sort of thing, what kind of inspired this? What inspired Isabel with this? And are we a little off base, or are we kind of on the right track as far as what you're going for and how that it was influenced maybe by other?
Yeah, I can tell you where we drew the most inspiration as far as gameplay and storytelling goes. This is also my second attempt at storytelling in a game,
right.
And this is much closer in the direction that I want to go. I still want to see it in a more concrete example, but I just wanted to start in an abstract form to essentially prove to myself that yes, we can tell stories in video games, and no, the industry is not doing it in a way that's compelling to me personally.
Sure.
As far as inspirations go, gameplay-wise, we drew a lot of inspiration from The Last Guardian, actually.
Okay.
If anyone has actually played The Last Guardian, in that game, you also have a companion, though the companion is a giant bird, dog, cat thing.
A little bit bigger than ping pong.
A little bit bigger than ping pong.
You can't ride ping pong.
Right.
Ping pong rides you.
And purrs while they're at it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it took a lot of inspiration just as far as the form of that game goes. Not so much the gameplay. They're pretty different mechanically, but their form is very, very similar. They're both essentially action puzzlers. And I think this game because it was so inspired by The Last Guardian, borrows a lot of the strengths of The Last Guardian. Specifically, it's very emotive. There's a lot of feeling involved in it. And it also grabs some of the same weaknesses, where it's essentially just a giant puzzle, which means that if you're ever stuck, that's it. You can't really do anything. Whereas a lot of other games, say Breath of the Wild, you don't get puzzle locked. You can still go and do other things in the game if you're unsure of how to progress in a particular puzzle. And so this is a shared flaw between my inspiration here and the game that we've created.
Right, just being singular as opposed to being very broad, which I think it's just safer for large companies that have to sell millions and millions of copies of a game in order to break even. They need to be broad in order to touch a larger user base. So it's admirable when you get a game like Last Guardian that was in development hell for 13 years or whatever it was, right, and to still come out and still be that singular kind of vision. And whether or not it's good is up for debate, but that's like what they wanted to do, and they ended up going through with it, and that's cool. I can respect that.
Admirable, that's right. So technically speaking, I guess I want to dive in a little bit more into how this game plays, right? So we can kind of sort of paint a picture here for the people listening. So it is a platformer first and foremost, as far as if we're technically speaking.
You are correct.
The verbs that you're using is move left, move right, jump.
Right.
And then pick up and throw also as
right.
the sprinkling on top that makes it unique.
Right, unique. That's exactly the word that I would use. This, you guys, with a limited period of time, with limited resources, you managed to do something that feels distinct, right? It's nothing that hasn't been done before, but it was done. It was the right combination of ingredients to sort of like, oh, I've never played a game like this before. So as far as those mechanics were, so what happens is you're dropped into this cave. And as you go, there are these blocks that you can pick up and throw strictly horizontally. You can't throw them up. They just go straight out. And they stick to walls. And so you're picking these blocks up and throwing them into the walls in order to platform your way up, right? It's all about verticality. And so it's interesting grabbing, throwing this thing, trying to get up to the next one, grab it midair. And so let me say, the first time I played it, Nick, I went through this I didn't get the game right away, right? Like I didn't take ping pong with me, which...
Right. I mean, I was going to say I didn't either. And that's like part of the interesting thing with a game like this. And puzzle platformers in general are really good about doing stuff like this, where they give you the tools, but they don't tell you what to do with them yet. And you kind of have to grok it out yourself. You have to figure out what you're supposed to be doing. And it got to the point where I understood, I should probably be bringing ping pong with me. And I think that you diegetically show that in a very natural way. But then that also led me to my first bad ending, where I sacrificed ping pong way too early, and it ended up that the entire cave system was empty. And then I got to the final area, and I was like, wait, wasn't ping pong's corpse back along the way? So I had to double back and grab him and brought him to the end and got the first sad ending. But then, I don't know, was that the ending that you got, EJ? Or did you actually...
EJ never made it to the finish line. So EJ, after sacrificing ping pong, took the final seed and plopped it down, and the game ended there.
So, okay. So, to paint a little more of a picture here, in the first room you're in, there's a block, right, it's a seed, essentially, and you plop it down into one of 3 holes, and a little sprout pops out the top. As you go through the game, you find these other ones and you drop them down. And then ping pong, this little ball character you carry with you, there are enemies in the game that don't hurt you. And, I went through this whole first playthrough. Nick, I got to the end of the game where you get to those 3 bad dudes at the end. You've made it to the top level of the cave. And I realized, I need to bring that character from the beginning with me. So I had to go back and re-platform all the way back, which... completely changed the way the game played, because now you're dealing with this character who you have to...
Yeah, I don't know what you were doing, but when I was going through initially and I didn't have ping pong with me, I wasn't burdened with the weight of that poor little critter. Right. I was carrying the blocks that you could platform on from room to room, So I just always had one with me, just in case, just a spare.
Right.
And it made it a lot quicker. So I was just running through these areas a lot quicker. And since I sacrificed him, there was also none of the bad guys at all throughout the rest of the game.
Oh, really?
So by the time I went through again, and I was carrying ping pong with me, then there are these obstacles that I suddenly had. But it didn't take me that long to figure out that they wouldn't hurt me. But every time I brought poor little ping pong nearby, he'd start crying. They'd start writhing about, and I'd be very concerned about the safety of my little companion.
Right. And so it took me, because I'm an idiot, as we've established on this podcast, it took me, I was focusing strictly on the platforming, and I didn't put all the puzzle pieces together initially. What I think you did really well was, and we talked about this on the last podcast actually, is good game design is you have to show the player exactly what they need to do. Right, the base mechanics, show them how to do it. Don't tell them. You don't need a text box. We don't need lengthy tutorials. Show them in as simple a way as possible. Have them do it on their own right away, and then they extrapolate.
Yeah, with no stakes at first, and then you steadily increase the stakes and increase the reward because of that.
Right. So I think you did a brilliant job of designing that. And every time I got to a new room, there was a new little piece of the puzzle to figure out. Each time I looked back and said, I see what you did there. So I feel like the pacing and progression through the whole thing was really good, where every time I got to a new room, I quickly figured out how to do it, but then quote unquote mastering it, getting to it's like, okay, now I have to actually execute. I felt like the pacing was really good there. That was very satisfying.
And that's both a strength and a weakness in the sense that there's essentially each room is a micro puzzle in the giant macro puzzle of trying to figure out the entirety of the game and just the little mechanics, specifically how they're going to work, so that you can figure out the order in which you have to resolve the micro puzzles in order to finish the game.
That's exactly it, resolving them. And how many times did I go back after
it's like 3?
Figured out how to, I'm like, oh, okay, so now I need to take him with me. So now that completely changes how I solve the puzzle in this room, because I have this creature now burdening me. I've got to avoid the bad guys in the level. I've got to figure out how to platform, only being able to hold one platform block and ping pong this character. I can only hold one of them at a time. So figuring out how, okay, I pick him up, I drop him here. Okay, but I gotta keep him away from the bad guy. Okay, I put the block here. And then another mechanic introduces the blocks act as a weapon. So I can box in or push over one of the bad guys who would be coming after ping pong.
Yeah, he's got to pop him off a platform, man.
Exactly. So the way you introduce these little mechanics, very simple mechanics, and how by the end, as you double back, they all suddenly tie in together. Mm-hmm. I thought it was very brilliantly done. I gotta say, and I think Nick, again, this is because I'm an idiot and Nick's not, is you picked up quickly kind of the story it was telling and figuring out what you needed to do. I was strictly looking at it from a technical perspective, right? And just trying to get to the end of the puzzle, figuring out, and then I realized, I've got to go back and get this guy and take him to the end.
Well, like I said, I went to the end without ping pong.
Right.
Then I brought his body to the end because I had killed him, but you didn't. So what was your experience after bringing ping pong along with you?
For some clarity here, you get to the end of this game, and there were 3 or 2.
Just a quick note: how many spoilers do you want to give? Totally up to you. I'm fine either way.
I say we spoil it. We're talking about
it.
If you're comfortable with it,
yeah, I'm fine. I just wanted to make sure that that's the route you wanted to go.
Spoiler warning, folks. If you want to check this out, and I highly recommend you should, because it's an interesting experience. It's a concise experience. It'll take you 15 minutes.
It's free. I mean, there's no reason not to play it.
Yeah. So again, that's itch.io. Search where the ferns don't grow. Pick this bad boy up. So stop now. Go play it. Come back. And resume. So,
welcome back.
Yes. So you get to the end of the platforming, whether or not you've taken this little creature with you.
In your case, sort of the end, because there's more.
Right. So again, we mentioned the seeds at the beginning. There are 3 holes for 3 seeds, and each main level of the cave, you can drop a seed down into. So again, what I did was I got to the end with ping pong, and you meet these 3. I'm not sure what they are. The fucking arbiters of death. I don't know. I don't know what are these weird
the scions of adult responsibility.
Yeah, right. And they said, so the first time I got there, and they said, Milo, remind me what they said. Something about a trade or a sacrifice.
The first time that you show up, they say, "What have you to offer us?"
Okay, right. And so the second time I show up,
if you're not holding ping pong, yeah.
Right. Second time I show a ping pong, and they say, "Oh, a bargain."
Just to lay out the scene a little bit, you've got the three, as they're calling them, the arbiters of death on the left. You enter in from the right, tiny little room, and in front of the arbiters of death is a seed. There's a giant one blocking the exit, so you can't take the seed and drop it like you could with the other two. They're blocking your way. If you take the seed out of that room, it just withers and respawns back in that first room. And so you're blocked by them. You bring in ping pong, and there's the seed in front of you, and then they say, a bargain.
So my initial thought was, can I knock these guys off? Can I kill them somehow? So I'm throwing the seed at them. I don't know what to do. So I give them ping pong. Apparently, they disappear. I drop the seed in. I thought ping pong was still alive. He dropped onto the second level. I dropped to the first level. And I was like, oh, I can't go back and get him. But I dropped the seed in. The plants grew and the game was over. I thought the game was over. So Nick, you didn't get that.
No, that was my second ending.
That was your second ending.
Yes.
So there's a third ending.
Yes and no.
Well, the first, I don't know if you would consider it an ending. It was a soft ending. Was I sacrificed ping pong to the first baddie I saw because I saw it shown in the room before, and I was like, oh, that's how you get rid of them. So I just did it, and then went through the rest of the game, jolly old whatever. Wasn't even worrying about the seeds and the other parts because the room you start out in has the 2 seeds, and the first one you plant grows ping pong, and the second one you plant is just it just shows a little sproutling. So I just ran through the rest of the game, and I got to a fountain with a light shining in the middle, and nothing was happening, and it was like an endless loop thing where you run out the right and you show up in a screen on the left side, and then you run through the right side and you show up on the left side, So I went back and I grabbed Ping Pong's body and I brought it to the fountain, and this giant being shows up in the background, just like floats upwards and is like,
what?
we know you tried. Thank you for bringing our baby.
Whoa!
And then goes away.
This is fucking me up right now, dude. I didn't see any of this.
You can just keep running around, but the game doesn't kick you back to the start screen. So I didn't even try planting the seeds on that. So that was probably a separate ending as well if you plant the seeds after that. But I started over because I wanted to see what would happen if you brought ping pong along fully alive to the end, but then I got stopped by those damn arbiters,
Okay, so Milo, explain this alternate third ending that neither of us got.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. Okay, so first of all, I wanted to prove that it was possible to do a storytelling game that felt unique depending on your own player experience, but also was still linear. So technically there isn't a different ending. However, you can get ping pong to the parents, which is what we refer to the floating being as. You can get ping pong to the parent alive. That is entirely possible.
I didn't even see the parents at all.
Yeah.
So this is, wow,
we'll
okay.
have to go back and show you.
Wow. Very interesting. I was like, mission accomplished. We both experienced very different things while still sort of getting the idea of this mood and this feeling that you're trying to convey. That's very interesting. So continue. What is this? How do we get the perfect ending? Get ping pong to his parents alive.
Get ping pong to the parents alive. I'm not going to tell you how to do it.
Oh shit! Okay, all right. So this is not a spoilery podcast.
That's
apparently.
That said, having watched you play and hearing Nick your story, I do have one design change that I'm going to shift. That's going to make it hopefully a little bit clearer.
Okay.
As to how to accomplish that, because I want people to be able to do that, but I don't think I've actually seen a single person solve it, except for maybe one friend who was also a playtester, so he doesn't really count.
Okay. So it's interesting how, I had a nice experience with it. I was impressed with a lot of the things you did. I was telling you earlier, I'm very proud of this thing that you made, especially seeing when you came from Mountaineer, which was obviously 48 hours, very rushed. But hearing kind of what you want to do with video games and seeing you go back and 6 months later, it's like leaps and bounds, right? So that was awesome.
And you actually programmed this game yourself, so that's something that you hadn't done before, right? Or had you messed around with much programming?
I've done bunches of tiny programming projects, but I do not consider myself a programmer. I'm more interested in design, but I am capable of scripting. So and clearly of making an entire minigame.
So you were the sole scripter. What's the word I'm looking for? Coder?
That's programmer.
Programmer.
Yeah, so let me just talk about what we did. Isabel did all of the concept art, all of the animation, and all of the writing, though that was a little bit more collaborative. For me, I did the programming, the core systems design, and by core systems design, I mean like the gameplay and the game rules and all that. I did the story structure and how the story unfolds. Again, really wanting to explore how games tell stories, because we can talk about that later, but they're going to tell stories way different than we're used to thinking of a story, and it's sort of like ninja storytelling. But ask me about that when we're done here.
Okay.
And then I did the audio effects, which are they're using free sound effects at their base level, but then I threw them into Audacity and mixed and paired different ones, and then threw on different audio effects to create that sort of experience that we wanted, what our vision for that was. Yeah, we didn't have recording tools to go out and capture live sound effects, and in 3 weeks, you just don't have time.
No, but that's interesting to see how these constraints led to something that otherwise you would have never done, right? And again, like Nick said, the sound design, I think, was perfect for the feel and the vibe you're going for, and seeing kind of how you took these resources and transformed them is awesome. So yeah, like Nick said, I mean, for a 2-person team, for having coded this entire thing yourself, again, and last time we talked, you said specifically, I don't want to be a programmer. I want to, I want to be a creative, I want to be a project director, right? I want to have my hand in all these little things, but have a team of people I trust who specialize and can help me bring this vision to life and tell these stories. And so to see you just say, I'm going to grab this by the balls and we're going to have to do it ourselves, like that's huge.
Yeah, so, it's very important to me to understand what goes into each of the different roles on a team. We were talking over dinner, actually, how that can really screw up project management.
Oh, yeah.
This game was actually created using agile software development. So we had a burn down chart. We had the Scrum board, and I was tracking every day that we were doing work, because it was originally a 2-week game jam, and so we were trying to create that on schedule, and we did to some extent. But the version you played had a couple of extra tweaks that I added in after a third play test that happened after the game jam had ended.
So how much is kind of changed now that you saw me play when we were having this conversation?
There's only one thing that I'm going to change.
Okay. Are you allowed to divulge what this is?
I'm going to place another mushroom.
No, because he doesn't want to tell us how to get the good ending.
The mushroom.
I'm going to place another mushroom.
And the mushrooms are important. I thought those were decoration. I didn't pick up on what the mushrooms
Okay,
were
so
for.
let's talk about the design purpose of the mushrooms.
Please.
They're drastically different than anything you see in the game, yeah?
Yes.
Right, and that's because they're drastically different than anything you see in the game. When you see one, you are going to know where you are, and I've had people get really lost. It's a really, really simple setup to the designer, who has the map and knows exactly what the thing looks like. But I was playtesting it, and some people got lost, and so we added these little mushrooms in certain key areas that when you see that, and I know that this works because you walked back into the room, like, oh, I've been here before, damn it.
Okay, yeah. Okay, see, it's subtle. I mean, obviously, in retrospect, I'm like, oh, that makes total sense.
Right.
Because I did exactly what you intended it to do. But I kept thinking, like, I can't pick these up, I can't consume these. Obviously, my entire life I've been taught that you consume mushrooms in video games for some sort of power-up. Okay.
That's true. It makes you bigger.
Yes. And these did nothing but confuse me. But now it all makes sense.
Yeah, they're markers. They're to help you orient yourself.
Okay.
And I will be adding one more to make that final puzzle a little bit clearer. I think it'll both give you a clear goal of where you need to go, and also sort of draw a connection that will hopefully point out which skills you've already learned and just need to apply in a different room.
Right. Fascinating, Milo. It's just kind of seeing the man behind the curtain and being like, duh, right?
Yeah.
Like, but when you're playing it, you're just kind of immersed in the game.
Right.
And kind of focusing on what's in front of you. And so now I'm like, oh, that makes so much sense. And I feel like an idiot, right? I can just imagine, what were you thinking watching me fumble around this game world trying to figure it out?
Mainly I was thinking, crap, I didn't do my job as a designer.
Well, Nick clearly picked up on it much quicker than I did.
He did.
But again, I'm an idiot, so.
And I just approach video games, I think, differently than you do. I'm really looking at the technical aspects of it a lot more, kind of trying to pay attention to what the rules are physically, especially with, okay, what's the build up, what's the acceleration of movement, and how does that affect my aerial speed? How's my turnaround in air? All that kind of stuff that affects the platforming, and trying to brute force things that I wasn't supposed to just to see if I could. And just like kind of stuff like that. So I think we just have different approaches to how we play games.
I don't think that's up for debate. So technical stuff aside, from a storytelling perspective, in one way, you have to make a linear game, but you're telling a very non-linear story. You have different endings. You have different ways to achieve.
It's multiple different paths to the same ending, unless you just go plant all the seeds, in which case, game over.
Isn't that interesting? This is very analogous to life, right?
Yeah.
Like there's some goal here, but there are all these different possibilities for an ending here, and sometimes unfortunately things end before you want them to. And
yeah, that's video games, right?
I mean, yeah, right. It's player agency and the choice to either win or fuck it all up and fuck it all up. I
like this kind of storytelling a lot more than your typical kind of trying to be a movie facsimile kind of story, where I think the prime example that keeps jumping into my head is something like Hyper Light Drifter.
I was just gonna say,
there isn't a story. Like, it's not something that happens and then that happening is told to you. It's just you are this person and you're doing these things, and then those things happen. And it's do, not show. So it's very different than what the typical kind of storytelling is. Show me, don't tell me. It's let me do it, and then that's the story. So I can only imagine how difficult that could be from a planning perspective, and say, okay, so I've got this concept and these feelings that I want people to feel. It's almost like writing an album musically, and then not lyrically telling the story, but the sounds that a violin makes or a drum makes or a guitar makes, and having that impart that sadness or joy or anger, and it's very high concept, and I appreciate that kind of storytelling a lot more in video games.
Video games has to be one of the most difficult mediums, however you split it, right? Because you're trying to tell these stories through every kind of medium. We've got music and we've got text and we've got... So as a designer, to not only pay attention to, okay, technically how is this game going to play, but then how are we going to create this atmosphere, and how we're going to use both of those to create the parameters of a game world, and then let the player discover it themselves and take it. Like, it seems impossible to me.
And how do we tell this story to Nick? And how do we tell this story to EJ? And how do we tell this story to very different people?
Yes.
And And how do we make it fun?
Yeah,
that's also something we haven't talked about. Is it fun?
Yeah.
Is it an enjoyable experience? And so it just seems like an impossible task on all accounts. And so you must have a very unique perspective on obviously what it's like to develop a game and what goes into it. And so this made you appreciate the games that you play on a different level?
Yes and no, in that I've said that so many times on this podcast. There's a lot of...
Very ambivalent today, Milo.
Yeah.
Get it together.
I can't.
Pick a side.
All the food in my belly. Can't pick sides. Anyways, the EJ fed me, and so I'm very happy, and that's why I'm willing to do this podcast with him.
You guys have 10 minutes before I fall asleep on this table. I'm carved out, so...
Right.
Anyway.
A lot of why the AAA gaming industry is the way that it is makes a lot of sense to me now. And also, it's so many of the decisions are made based on money. I mean, if we just cut through all of the bullshit and just get straight to it, it's because of money.
Right.
Whereas if you go and look at a lot of, say, Nintendo games, whether or not you're a Nintendo fan, they don't really make games for the sole purpose of it's a crap ton of money. I mean, the gaming industry has surpassed film as far as gross revenue goes. It's just skyrocketing. And so these massive companies will take to game development as a money-making venture, which it's going to make a lot of money.
Isn't it video games is now a $130 billion industry? That's a number I just read. Nick, can you verify? You're a fact man.
Sounds about right. It could be more. I'm not sure.
Like, that's an absurd amount of money.
Serving the lowest common denominator, you say it surpassed the movie industry, and people are very critical about that's what the movie industry has been doing. It's just remakes of 80s movies that were successful. So it makes sense that the biggest companies in the world have to make these games that make money. But I mean, like you said, with these big companies making these very broad games, I do want to commend some of the initiatives that those companies also partake in,
Absolutely.
and showing that they're still creators, and you still get EA published indie games, and you still get UbiArt games, you still get Activision made a goddamn Crash Bandicoot remake, and they didn't have to do that.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it was very successful for them. That's great.
You also get some really beautiful AAA games. I'm really personally fed up with all the violence in video games. I think that it's just like, yes, I've seen it. I get it. We're creative. We can make killing things feel really good.
Right.
What now?
Yeah.
Right? And there are some games that do that in the AAA sector, such as The Last Guardian. Really, really wonderful example. And I know a lot of people find it frustrating for its controls and its frame rate issues and a couple of other reasons like that. Managing Trico, the bird dog cat. That said, it's also something that's never been done in a video game. And for that, it has my undying respect.
Would have been
Right.
really sick on the PS2.
It would have
Would have
been.
been really sick.
It was supposed to come out then on the PS3, and then it got slated for PS4.
No, I understand what you're saying,
it
though.
was showed at like E3 2007 or something.
Right.
A long time ago, yeah.
Definitely still making PS2s in 2007.
Well, I mean, Shadow of the Colossus came out 2006, I think, on
Dang.
PS2.
Wow.
I'd like to take a quick spin back at
Yes, sir.
what I was referring to as ninja storytelling. And storytelling in games is so freaking difficult because you're telling a story in the second perspective. Now, let's just take a moment and stop. How many books, how many movies, how many songs have you observed, been a part of, watched, read, that are in the second perspective? Yeah.
Right.
Probably
Crickets.
maybe one. I'm not
Maybe
sure.
one.
I can't think of any.
Songs probably more than any of the other ones that I mentioned. But even then, it's a different experience. It's passive. You're listening. You're not involved in it. You're just taking it in.
Right.
And so video games are active second-person storytelling. And this hasn't been done. We don't know how to do it. That's why it's so hard. And so what happens is that we try to keep borrowing from film, which is... It isn't second-person storytelling. You're watching other people. It's very clear you're watching other people going about a story, and you're watching other
Right.
people. You're not, I am the other person
Right.
doing these things.
You've no influence over what is happening.
Right.
Hey, there is that one first-person movie, the Hardcore Henry or whatever that was called. Remember that? With the GoPro?
All right, the exception to the rule. Nick.
Just saying, there's one.
You're being pedantic.
That's my job.
Mission accomplished.
This has been the Constant Crusade podcast, everybody. We will catch you next week.
Right.
Anyway.
So there's been studies done, and games have sort of been trying to figure this out. And they've discovered that people remember the plots from their favorite movies in vivid detail. Even a 5-year-old could tell you the plot of Star Wars
Right.
with so much detail
Yeah.
and clarity and energy. But you ask the same people to talk about their favorite stories in video games, and they don't remember a whole lot. Now, I don't think this is because video game stories, the way that they've been told, are worse written or worsely structured. I think it's actually because, again, there's a fundamental difference between film and movies. And I'm going to tie this into your own personal experience in your everyday life here in a second. But first, that fundamental difference, again, is that it's second-person storytelling. So in a video game, when you've got a cutscene, it's someone telling you a story, and there's an immediate disjunct. You as the player are no longer in the game. You're now an observer. You're not a doer. Mm-hmm. And so that it breaks the story, so to speak. So video games really, I don't think, at their strongest, can tell stories like movies. They're not built to do that. Now, to tie it into your own personal experience, video games, I think, are going to be at their strongest storytelling-wise when they tell stories the same way that our lives tell stories. And so let me break this down a little bit.
Terrifying.
Now, if you think about your life, or even in most cases, you're just going about your day-to-day life, working with whatever it is you're working with, your emotions, what you need to get done, and you're just trying to get from moment to moment, or maybe you have some goal and you're in the moment to moment doing those things to get to that goal. Now, if you stop and in the moment that you're doing it, it's really not that fantastic of a story. Like, you look at this and you're like, yeah, it's just my life. But now you go recount all the events to a good friend, right? They're observing. This is like if they would be watching a movie, and suddenly dude, your life is amazing. And you're like, what? No, it's just my life.
Right.
But that's because you are the person doing that story. And video games are the same thing. So video games, you are doing the story. And because of that, we don't experience them the same way that films do. We don't remember them like we remember film. It's ninja storytelling. All of these magical events and twists and turns can happen. We're just not necessarily going to see it that way because we're the ones living it. Someone else, however, might see it in a completely different light.
That's fascinating.
I think some of the best, like you were saying, the storytelling is what you're doing. And some of the most popular games in the world are all about interacting with other people. So that makes it more akin to a story of your own life, because your own life is not you just going about interacting with robots. It's you interacting with people. It's you. That's what makes it change and makes it volatile. So games like Minecraft and Fortnite are all about the stories that you tell in that weird little microcosm of a video game experience, where you have these tools that you're given and then you interact with each other with those tools.
Absolutely.
So I wonder if there's a way that you can enforce a story on top of that, or if that's just a fool's errand, and if that is even a possibility. And I wonder what the future of AI and scripting and getting that down, because I've seen some really interesting games. I haven't played them, but I've seen them. So take this with a huge grain of salt, but with interacting with a computer script, basically, that you're talking to, and it's trying to trick you into thinking that it's like another person. I'm trying to impart the story that way. And it's like puzzle games like that, where you're like on a ship and then you're interacting with the AI on the computer. But I wonder if games in the future, a game like The Witcher 4 or Elder Scrolls 7, will have real-time quests where you're given a task to do, but if you do a task in one of the hundreds of ways that you could go about it, because that's real life, you can do things very slowly, very fast, and that will change the outcome. Or you can do things one way or the other, and that'll change the outcome. If they'll have the ability to deliver that story in a way that makes it feel more like I'm not playing the video game, but more that I'm experiencing this story. And how that, goddamn, I can't even imagine how much work that shit would have to be put into it.
We also, I think, would kind of look at it and be like, okay, I need to make this grand, fully realized world with super AI that can react exactly right to all human behavior. And I've heard that that's often like seen as the holy grail, but I think that's wrong. Because all great art is really just highlighting, bringing attention to certain little key things. And so that reason alone, I think, makes it possible that games can tell really great stories. We just need to go into it trying to tell really good stories and understanding that they're not going to tell stories like a movie does.
Yeah, because if you're just playing a video game that has a lot of cutscenes, that's just a game with a movie in between.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, and think about it, though, because I think there's still something valid there. You look at games like God of War. Mm-hmm. That was a relatively linear game that was... Mm-hmm. It was basically fighting set piece to cutscene to fighting set piece in a lot of ways. And
it was Ocarina of Time writ large, though.
Right, but that kind of storytelling, for what that is, that works. That's what some people want.
Yeah.
So I think what you're talking about, Milo, isn't necessarily the evolution. It's this divergent path of, sure. And we're seeing it with the evolution of walking simulators or things like Telltale games, where we're getting new ways to tell stories with a level of interactivity that we haven't had before. I think there's another branching path that we're going to go down that is going to potentially influence these other types of games, but not replace them.
Yeah. And my goal as a designer isn't to say, oh, this is better and this is the way that all games are going to do it.
Right.
That said, I find stories most compelling in games when they are told in this fashion. And so that's what draws me as an open question, is how do I create a world that lets you live the story through your actions?
Which I think the closest sort of facsimile to that right now is something like immersive sim games like your Deus Ex kind of series, or just games that give you a large array of tools and you're allowed to use those tools in a very... It makes sense the way that it works, like physics sims kind of games. Even something like Portal, where you're given just this gun and you have a basic understanding of how gravity works, and then you solve puzzles.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like that is a good storytelling mechanism, in that you're interacting with the environment and you are the one, your verbs that you push out onto the world is what the story is driven by. And sure, it's a lot of just like this robot talking to you while you're doing it, but that's not really the story of Portal. The story is you doing the thing in Portal. So I think that games like that kind of are the closest to what we have to that right now.
I also think Half-Life does a particularly good job of this. I haven't played Half-Life 2 or any of the episodes, but the first one I was playing just recently, and it does this remarkably well. And it amazes me that this got done so early, and this is still a question of like, is this even possible? Because it is possible. We've done it. We just haven't really elaborated on it, I think.
I think those are they take a lot of work, and they don't make enough money to necessitate them being made. So
yes, getting shot in the face and uber realistic blood splatters everywhere typically corners the AAA market.
A little flashier, right? A little easier to market to the teenagers.
And I understand the evolution of violence in games. It makes a lot of sense from a purely mechanical standpoint, where I'm playing this game and there's an obstacle in my way, so the easiest way to continue is to remove the obstacle.
Destroy it!
Yeah.
Right. I mean, you jump on a Goomba and that's violent as hell. You just obliterated this little brown creature from existence, you know? So it makes sense that it just progresses and progresses. And
I feel like I'm going to have an existential crisis. Like I'm going to go to bed tonight just being like,
perfect.
Wow, those guys had a lot of really good things to say. I have to reevaluate my life, the way I process things. And
Close your third eye, EJ.
Oh my goodness. I want to branch out and get a little broader. I got to readjust my chair here briefly. Milo's got to drink some LaCroix. Whew. So I want to get a little broader with the brief time we have. I think we only have a few minutes left with Nick here. I know you had a couple of questions to broadly sort of just pick Milo's brain as an aspiring developer and sort of what he thinks and how he feels about the current state of indie games in the industry, kind of through the lens as an aspiring developer and doing things on this micro level. We haven't even mentioned, we mentioned on the last pod that you got accepted to DigiPen, but you didn't know what was happening with that, whether you were going to be able to go. Spoiler alert, he's going. Is that next week?
Yeah, I know. I leave to go move in on Friday night. We'll be moving in Saturday morning.
Wow.
So that's tomorrow at the time of recording.
Oh, it's happening, Milo.
That's not next week at all.
Oh, God, it's now. Yeah. You're gone already. Oh, so
we hardly knew ye.
We might have to do
it's been lovely to see your lovely beard, Nick, and EJ, you're always a delight.
Well, thank you, Milo. We're not going to dive too much into the school thing now. I think we should do a follow-up pod, though, after this conversation, because this has been great, and maybe we'll have to follow up next month once you've kind of dipped your toe and started school. But, Nick, you had a couple questions that I think are really good, and I'd be curious to know what Milo thinks about some of those. Just as far as, again, the current indie space.
Right. So, as you know, making video games is easier now than it ever has been before, which means that anybody can make a video game, which means everyone is making a video game
right.
Because it's fun and satisfying and you get to put your ideas out in the world. And more creativity, I think, in general, is a good thing. But with that, it also means a flooding of the platforms with a lot of games, and it becomes harder and harder to decide what is worth my time and my hard-earned cash. So a lot of ideas have been put out there that certain platforms should be more walled off. It should be harder to get your game onto a PS4, onto a Switch, onto an Xbox, onto Steam. Or should it be that anybody can put those games on there and they should float by their own merits, and it should be... What is the answer to this? Do these platform holders need to curate their platforms more easily? Should there be better algorithms in place that suggest, oh, you like this game, maybe you should try this game? Is that a fool's errand as well? Because, oh, you like this game, well, you should buy this game that we sold advertisers like money to put higher up on your recommended lists or what have you. And what does it look like for you thinking ahead the future as someone who wants to make these indie games, and how are you going to market yourself? How do you make that distinction to say, hey, I want this game to be played by a lot of people? Clearly, because why else would you put a game on Steam or on itch or make it available? Is you want people's feedback, you want people to enjoy your creation. So I guess, what are your ideas on the idea of a walled garden community platform, and how does an indie get noticed without just striking gold or getting some YouTuber to stream their game or paying out the nose for advertisement or a publisher picking it up? I mean, that's a complicated series of questions, and I'm sorry, but I've got a lot of ideas and thoughts about this, and I just wanted to get some of your input because you're actually doing the thing.
Sure. Now, as far as getting noticed as an indie, I'm afraid I can't answer that because I've just been dabbling so far. I haven't actually gone out and been like, okay, I'm now an indie developer and we've got a game and we're going to try and sell it. So as far as that goes, I don't have an answer outside of, I think the singular most important game development skill to have is marketing and luck.
Right, and even just networking, I would imagine, would be huge for that. And that's why you get these huge conferences like E3 and GDC and Gamescom and Tokyo Game Show. It's so these people can meet each other because these games are being made by people, just hidden behind the face of a logo and a brand and a corporate entity.
I find it interesting how, like, you posed the question, like, should everybody just have access to everything and these games will just, the cream will sort of rise to the top, as they say. And I think that is the answer. Like, it's good that the platform is more ubiquitous and people are able to create however they want to create. I remember having this conversation about music 10, 15 years ago where, holy shit, anybody can just record an album in their garage now. And back when MySpace was big and now we've got Spotify and iTunes, it's as easy as clicking a button to get your stuff out there with everybody else. Is that a good thing? Is that a bad? It's a good thing. The cream will rise to the top. Nick, you posed an interesting question with the advertiser. That, I think, gets murky. I'm of the mind that whether it's the platforms being more discerning in what they allow on their platforms, right? So Steam not letting certain games if they don't meet whatever requirements. I don't know what those requirements would be. Hopefully it wouldn't be a budget thing. That would be awful, right? That's a shitty way of gatekeeping these creations. But I think the way it works right now is the good games do get noticed. And maybe this is anecdotal, and you look at, for every Stardew Valley, right? One guy in his bedroom for a decade gets lucky on the internet, and now it's the biggest indie game. Freaking.
Well, he didn't just get lucky. He worked his ass off for like 10 years.
No. Again, but there are a lot of people who work their ass off for a lot of years and just continue working their ass off for a lot of years, right? He got lucky in that he got noticed and had not luckily, but he had worked hard to build something worth noticing, right? So it's kind of a two sides to it here. But in a way, the current system, I think, that's how it works. If you have something worth playing, people are going to find it. Is that going to always be the case? As Nick said with the advertise, it's like, intentionally now we're locking people out from ever having, there's no level playing field. If you don't have money, you're never going to get noticed. But I think companies like what Nintendo's doing with their Nindies, where they're all about pushing these games and raising awareness for these games. And obviously, it's mutually beneficial here. They've got a perfect platform for it, so they want to push these things. But, that's great for these developers who now have a voice that they never would have otherwise had, because there's this company who really wants as many of these, tiny indie games as possible. Nick, I don't know what your thoughts are on this. I think the way things are going now, it kind of works and it makes sense. I'm sure there are plenty of issues I'm totally unaware of because I don't develop games and I'm not in the industry. So I might eat some crow if one of our listeners says, well, actually, this is what's wrong with the industry and here's why.
Well, I think it gets messy just overall. Like, I just think back to, this happened recently. There's that game Donut County that's been shown at different like PAXs for the past few years. And it's sort of similar to Katamari Damacy, where instead of rolling up a big ball, you're controlling a hole in the ground, and as you drop things into the hole gets bigger, and you're just trying to drop bigger and bigger things into this hole in the ground. But then that game got copied by some like conglomerate in China and is on mobile right now. And that game and the original game that's been shown isn't even come out yet. So there's a bunch of different things that are just problems in general. And idea theft obviously is a bad one. But I'm kind of with you. I think that the majority of people who complain about there being too many games on certain platforms they're more just an old man yelling at the cloud, where they're like, things are different now and I don't like that. But what's different now also is that there are more voices that are saying, hey, this is a good game, you should check it out. There's more advocates. And I think that's important as a consumer to choose which advocates you want to follow. And I think that clearly benefits the large companies more because they're going to get the coverage no matter what, based on ad deals and also based on they have millions of customers already, and it behooves the advocates to talk about those things. So your major like gaming news outlets, no matter what. Like, people complain, oh, Call of Duty gets too high of a score every year. Well, it's because it's a great game, and they're going to cover it no matter what, because millions and millions of people play those games, so they're going to be looking for that coverage. So it's a cyclical kind of thing where they each benefit the other. But with an indie game, like, the most you're going to hear about a game might be its review score, or listening to it on a podcast, or maybe some YouTuber is taking it upon himself to find like one hidden gem that's on the Switch each week. And they're not getting paid to do that, probably. Like, they might get $10 of ad revenue and that pays for the game, but they're doing it because they just love talking about stuff, and more people are plugged in than ever before. And it's just a very different landscape than 15 years ago, where indies weren't nearly as predominant, and the game landscape was just, hey, there's these 10 games that came out this month, and not the 100 that came out today.
No, and I don't know. Again, I am not qualified to even presume to have an answer, right? My arms are on the table again. Just
bad, EJ, bad.
I keep doing that. This is going to be fun to edit. That's dense, Nick.
I'm sorry, I've got a lot of thoughts.
Oh, that's great.
They're very interesting. Thank you for sharing.
Overwhelming, Nick.
I'd like to add one more piece to that. I absolutely love that game development is now accessible to so many people, because I think oftentimes people can sort of get blocked out of certain industries based on financial things and this and that and the other. But with so many websites that allow publishing, like itch.io, and so many different voices that need to be heard if we're going to actually listen to each other in a country that could really use some listening. This is a wonderful thing to have so many people here making so many games. The flip side of that, as we've mentioned, is quality and like what's actually worth your time and that sort of a thing. And this is why I'm very appreciative of a lot of what the main like AAA developers do, and goes back, I think it was in the 80s when Nintendo actually had to go save the gaming industry by creating Nintendo quality standards. Because what was happening was all those people had access to game making, and they went and they made games, and they all got released, and there were all these like crappy games on the market and clones, and no one could keep track of it. And so Nintendo was like, no, you've got to pass our qualifications if you want to get on our system. And then we got much higher quality games because of it. And so I like the temperance of that. But of course, you can start running into some issues with getting noticed, and depending on who's holding what the qualifications are, you could potentially run into stuff like that. I may or may not have mentioned on this podcast before, but I'm deeply interested in running a AAA game company myself. And I'm lucky to be both young and naive enough to be just stupid enough to not really know what goes into that, and also just stupid enough to want to do it anyways.
The perfect razor's edge.
Exactly.
Right.
And so going into something like that, I'd love to start my own AAA company that can also find the types of creators that resonate strongly, because it's not really my goal as a game developer to sell a game to everyone. It's to sell a game to the right people, to the people that want games that talk about our lives, that really get us to dig into maybe some of the things we don't always want to look at in our own lives, because to me, those are always the most life-changing works of art.
And I think there is a growing like space in the market for that. I mean, Microsoft just bought Ninja Theory it was announced at E3 2 months ago. So I feel like studios that can make high quality, high budget games that aren't necessarily clinging to the same mold of what we're used to. They're not the lowest common denominator kind of seeking games. I think those will have a growing place in the industry and the market as a whole.
Milo, before we go, we'd never wrap back around to this. My elbow's on the table again. You look right at it, man. He just lasered in on it. Tell us Where the Ferns Don't Grow is about. Not Nick and I am sure we both have two different interpretations based on the experiences we had, which were two relatively different experiences. But just because we didn't touch on this, what is the story you're telling? And how do the decisions that you made in developing the game, the mechanics, the atmosphere, how and why did those play into the story?
First and foremost, as I mentioned earlier in this podcast, Where the Ferns Don't Grow is really a game about taking responsibility for your life. And I don't mean that in like, oh, I'm a free spirit, I don't need to do the dishes or what have you. I mean that...
Me.
Yes. I mean that we all have these beautiful, beautiful lives to live. And so often we throw those by the wayside because we're sort of run by our thoughts a lot of the time, right? There's... I don't know, Sally dumped me when I was 12, and because of that, I refused to buy popcorn because she really liked popcorn. And, you know, these things build on each other, and suddenly you hate the world because Sally liked popcorn. And it's just ridiculous. Right. And
we get caught up in the minutia of these little things that on their own don't matter, but the way they snowball and impact our lives. And so it's hard to sort of look at that bigger picture.
Right. And so really this game is about what would it be like if you didn't put in the work for your own life. And of course, this is done metaphorically through putting in the work of discovering where ping pong goes and getting ping pong home. What if you didn't do the work in your life that you needed to work past any of the stuff that you're holding on to internally? What if you didn't do the work? And EJ, as you saw, wasn't very satisfying.
I did plenty of work. It was not directed appropriately, apparently. I worked my ass off getting that, and then I planted all these seeds. Talk about metaphor for life. I was planting these seeds, and it led to nothing.
Exactly. And yet there was still something more, right? Necessary again.
Apparently.
Yeah. And so it's really about how deep are you willing to go? How much work are you willing to put into going that deep to live this big, beautiful life that we've been given? So first and foremost, that's what the game's about. Secondly, it's a platformer where you throw blocks to jump on things. It could be anything. It's kind of arbitrary. It's a means to tell this story, which has this underlying subtext. And this is just something that was familiar enough to me where I was like, I could probably make a game about this.
Yeah.
I like that because the story is the what you do, and it's also the why you do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very much so. And again, that's really for me. I mean, now we're talking about what makes a good story. All of the stories that are deeply impactful are about subtext. They don't, and especially the ones that don't lay it out for you. They give you all the pieces, but they don't give you the answer because it's more important that you come to the answer yourself. And a really great story is going to let you do that.
Yeah, it has to wink and nudge just softly enough that you think that you thought it yourself.
Exactly. Inception.
And on that note, that Hans Zimmer just infecting me.
That was Hans Zimmer?
Note.
Amazing.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Hans Zimmer? Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
He did all the Chris Nolan movies, I'm pretty sure.
Almost positive.
Amazing.
That you're correct. Anyway, it is getting late. I think it's time for us to wrap this up. This has been a very enlightening conversation. Philosophically, I'm way over my head. So I'm going to eat some ice cream and cry. Gentlemen, thank you for the time. This hopefully will work out in post. I'm going to edit this thing together, and hopefully everything works with this janky setup that I just took a picture. I'll tweet this out to you guys. Find us on Twitter, @console_crusade. My elbow's on the damn table again, and Milo's hitting me. Damn it, Miles Kent-Pettit. Find me on Twitter @ejiggle. Find Nick @PressTillDeath. Milo, where can we find you? Where can these fine listeners follow your journey as you go to college and continue to develop video games?
Oh, shoot. I guess I have to pick one now. Why don't you go look for me on Twitter? I'm KiloKPH. That's KILOKPH.
Bam. Future developer right here. Big time. Current developer, not future developer. Future AAA developer. All right. Gonna own your own company one day. I'll be there to say, I remember when. You know?
Right, and then I'll hire you.
Yeah. Beautiful. I'll do all your marketing.
There you go.
All right. This will be a brilliant tag team. Listen, guys, we didn't do a listener question thing this week because we are recording well before our planned recording date. So next podcast, we will definitely be doing that. Send us feedback, questions, concerns, but primarily questions for listener mail.
Criticisms, comments, critiques.
Right. You wouldn't be insulting me on my haircut right now, but luckily none of y'all can see me.
I can see it. I can question it.
Hey. You can email us at feedback@consolecrusade.com. Hit us up. Hit our line. All right? Follow us on Twitter. Don't follow me on Twitter. I'll block you. Follow Nick on Twitter. Follow Milo on Twitter. Milo, thank you for joining us.
It's been my pleasure.
Yeah, thanks for cooperating with this nonsense as we set things up. And
Yeah, thanks for your time. It was a lot of fun. It was kind of janky, but also appreciate you, EJ, for getting this all ham-fisted together or whatever.
Dude, we made it work. We'll do a follow-up pod next month, the next 2 months after you're kind of in school. I'd be curious to see how your perspective changes once you're in the thick of it, surrounded by other aspiring developers, your teachers, mentors who are doing it and have done it. So we'll be sure to follow up with you in the future. So this has been the Constant Crusade. My elbows are on the fucking table. Whew, feels good.